Hi and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 182. Don't ask me how I know. And today we're doing the Skeleton Crew for the Secrets of Strixhaven. And I do have Zach Kagan. Zach, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be enrolling in another semester.
Perfect. And we have someone who has enrolled on many a semester in Tresio.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be joining you as only a true teacher should do.
Are you Quandrix teacher, I assume?
Yeah, in a sense, I am a math teacher. That's
There
the
we
main
go.
grade. Yeah.
And just to give you if you don't know what skeletons are, which you're perfectly entitled not to know, instead of doing a review where we go through every card and we grade each card on their own merit, we build decks. And there are some rules how to build those decks. You can make your own. I highly recommend playing around and trying to build your own decks. Our rules are somewhere realistic and reasonable. So we put between 0 and 3 rares and mythics, 0 to 10 uncommons, and then fill up the deck with commons and some non-basic lands and add whatever numbers of basics we have just to build a 40-card deck. And you can do that very easily actually on the sealeddeck.tech, which is a website for building sealed pools, and they allow you to get this tool where you have all the cards from the set available and you can drag them around and then build your decks. It's a fun activity. And also in the process, most of the time you learn cards from the set, which is useful for the day one. So it's a nice exercise for the release, and they are very helpful for the community to provide good sealed deck building tools. So we always give them a nice shout out, even though they don't pay us a penny because it's a free project. Of course, they probably invest a lot of their own time in building the tool while making zero money of us, which is great for the community in general. And somehow they have built a better sealed builder than the Arena internal one. So when you build your sealed deck pools on Arena, it's probably best to export them directly to sealeddeck.tech, build them there, import them back, and enjoy playing, because you will lose a lot less stress and you will not miss cards because they are hidden somewhere at the end of a very small pile. Alright, so this is how we build the skeletons. Zach and Tresio have built their different version. We're going to go through the philosophy of the set because it's slightly different than the philosophies we had before. It's slightly different layout. But before we move into that, I normally start with a bit of statistics on the removal. And these are the stats from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, just to show where we were last time and compare it with the current one. So last time, I usually do the damage-based removal as the main kind of statistic. Stomped by the Foot, which was the 2 damage removal of choice for the TMT set. It killed around 38% of the creatures and at common and 45% at uncommon. And then Manhole Missile, the 3 damage spell, killed around 70% of commons and 74% of the uncommons. And general rule is that once you go to 4, 5, 6 damage, those things converge. There's not much difference between different sets in terms of how many creatures does a 4 damage spell kill. And similar story here. However, with 2 and 3 damage, there are quite big discrepancies on how many creatures do those spells kill. And, for the 2 damage spell, it goes... 38 was actually pretty low for common, so it goes between like maybe 35 and 50%. For the 3 damage spell, it goes something between 65 and 80%. So turtles were low on both 2 damage and 3 damage spells on what percentage of common creatures they kill. In Strixhaven is a bigger set, so we have a wider range of removal as well. And first of all, there is not that many 1-drops, X1s. Not even 1-drops, creatures with 1 toughness. Dissection Practice, which obviously has other uses apart from being direct removal for something, because it can be a combat trick and probably should mainly be used as one. It does kill around 10% at each rarity, which is quite actually low for those sets. So I don't think that you should be treating this as a 1-mana removal spell. You should be treating more like a combat trick that will change the outcomes of closely matched combats, especially when multiple creatures are involved. And maybe when we look at some later strategies, I think that it might be actually quite decent because there is a large chunk of creatures within a very narrow band of powers and toughnesses. And I think that if you have that kind of large clump of creatures that have similar stats, changing the stats ever so slightly for 1 mana is going to have a disproportionately large effect on the outcomes of games. So I'm quite hopeful on Dissection Practice, especially as a 1 mana gain life thing, which will also let you enable some infuse mechanic, which we will learn about in a second. Then we have Tome Blast, which is a 2 damage spell. The 2 mana deals 2 damage and 5 mana you can flash it back. This kills half of all common creatures. So that's significantly more than Stomped by the Foot killed in Mutant Turtles. And then around 36% of the uncommons and 36% of the rare and mythic creatures. So I think it looks like 2 damage is significantly better than it was in TMT set and in the sets before that as well. 3 damage, we have several spells that do 3 damage, and I picked Last Grasp. Again, it's a -X spell, which means that it can be used as a combat trick quite efficiently, but it also will kill 77% of all the creatures at common, which is again more than 69% we had in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This does not count any token makers, but actually most of the tokens that are made in this set would also be killed by Last Grasp, maybe with the exception of some large fractals. So it would deal with those as well. And then 68% of the uncommons, that's actually less than in Ninja Turtles. Ninja Turtles had pretty small uncommon sized creatures. And 56% of the rares, that's sort of on par, more than it was in the Turtles, but it's in the range, sort of. And then we end up with those 4, 5, and 6 damage spells. 6 damage spells will be almost unconditional removal for base value of the creature. We're going to talk about it. I don't think, and I think that you agree with me, that base value of the power and toughness of a creature is not a particularly good way of judging them, because this set is also based on targeting creatures to make them bigger as part of the couple of the mechanics. But for the sake of this argument, not heated in this particular case, 6 damage would kill almost everything. 100% of commons and uncommons, 92% of the rares and mythics. Things like Unstable Mockery, the difference between this 3 damage, so 3 mana 4 damage spell and the 5 mana 6 damage spell, is mainly in the number of rare and higher rarity things that it can kill. 4 damage will only kill roughly 3/4 of the rares and mythics. It will deal with over 90%, 92% of the commons and uncommons, so quite a large chunk. And Wilt in the Heat, similar situation. It will kill more rares, does 85% of them, but only like 95% of the commons and uncommons, so slight increase from the Unstable Mockery. Wilt in the Heat, particularly interesting because it could be a 2 mana spell, which is a great rate. If you can kill around 90% of all the creatures in the format for 2 mana, that's not a bad deal that you're getting there. Especially if you're exiling the target afterwards. So this is the damage-based removal. On top of that, we have a couple of pieces of conditional removal. Spells that will kill based on other attributes that are not necessarily toughness. And here we have Stand Up for Yourself. This kills roughly half of creatures at every rarity. It does kill creature with power 3 or greater. So not only it kills half of all the creature, it kills the more impactful half, the things that are bigger and harder to deal with. And it's also, unlike a damage-based removal where you can point your 4 damage spell onto something and opponent plays a combat trick, grows it and puts it out of range, here growing something is putting it more in the range rather than outside of the range. So in this way, it's a nice way of dealing with a creature, avoiding the risk of combat trick, saving that creature from the removal. And next we have Glorious Decay. This is this card that they are trying to introduce in every set now, that is a sort of sideboard card that you could be tempted in playing in the main deck. It's the modern version of Broken Wings, where Broken Wings was clearly a sideboard card in most of the versions of that card. Nowadays, they try to put some kind of a buyout clause that would maybe tempt you to play it main deck if the format is right for it. And here that extra option is exile target card from a graveyard, draw a card. So you basically cycle it with some small kind of effect, and that should convince you that maybe sometimes it's worth main decking that card.
Triggers all your Lorehold synergies.
The
Triggers all your Lorehold synergies. Must be broken.
Yeah, that first of all, it can trigger opponent synergies for Lorehold. And second of all, it doesn't even kill a creature with flying. It only deals 4 damage to target creature with flying, which makes it kill around 15% of the creature that will be either artifact creatures or flyers that have toughness below 4. The problem, of course, is that the Broken Wings, maybe not the best card, but at least it deals with the most atrocious flying bombs, and this one is having the drawback of Broken Wings not being amazing without the upside of killing the big flyers. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to be putting that into my main deck that often, hopefully. And then we have 2 charms that are looking very similar, but actually are doing very different things. Silver Quill Charm, as one of the modes, has exiling a creature with power 2 or less. So everything with power 0, 1, or 2 dies to Silver Quill Charm. But as we mentioned before, a lot of combat tricks, a lot of spells that increase power and toughness, plenty of them at instant speed, plenty of them costing very little mana as well. Which means that it will be, even to 1 mana, it will be sometimes risky to play Silver Quill Charm. And yes, it does kill 50% of all the creatures, which is still good for a 2 mana spell. It will be the creatures with, on average, lower impact on the game, because we're talking mainly about 1 and 2 drops that it will kill, maybe some 3 drops. And the 3 drops that have 2 power, most of the time will have some sort of ETB, which means that part of the value of that creature has already been accrued. Then the second card we have is a Witherbloom Charm, and this one destroys target non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. So it doesn't look at power, looks at the mana value. Mana value doesn't change. In fact, some things that will be cast for 9 mana but have X in their cost still will be 2 mana permanents, because their casting cost is blue-green X, for example. So it might kill some really big things for the Witherbloom Charm. This one will be hard to escape from, and it will get their target, because you cannot change the mana value of this permanent when it's on the battlefield. So you don't have to stress about pointing it towards a creature. It also can deal with some other permanents. However, it's maybe worth noting there's very few enchantments in this set, and then not that many artifacts. So creatures is probably still going to be the main thing. Like for example, 0 auras in this set, not a single one. Because of the Repartee mechanic and other mechanics we're going to be discussing later that specifically care about instant and sorcery. So a lot of the things that normally will be done by enchantments in the set were outsourced to instant and sorcery spell this time, one way or another. Witherbloom Charm does kill around 40% of commons and around, quarter to a third of uncommons and higher rarity cards. And with other modes that you have there, like sacrificing any permanent to draw some cards or gaining some life, I think that card looks pretty solid if you're going to be into the Witherbloom decks, especially ones that want to go a bit longer. And, decks that want to go longer both want to get rid of 2 drops, because that's the danger that you're going to fall so far behind that you cannot stabilize the game. And also will be interested in accruing value later by sacrificing something or by gaining some life to put you outside of the range of your opponent's sneaky snowballing attacks, to which we come later. Lastly, we have sweepers, and there's definitely several of them. There is Withering Curse, which is 3 mana to give all the creatures -2/-2 until end of turn. However, if you gain life the turn, it will destroy all creatures instead. And now, one thing is that you don't have control over that, so I can imagine that you can cast it wanting to give -2/-2 to everything, and your opponent forces you somehow to gain life. I don't know if that's possible, and all of a sudden you wrath all the board. So you have to keep that kind of in mind, or that you gain some life accidentally on a turn, and you don't want to cast the wrath part. Well, you have to play around it. I think it's going to be, especially in the Witherbloom, which is the black-green, it's going to be relatively easy to trigger it and cast it. Potentially not on turn 3, but maybe on turn 4 or 5, you can easily probably cast it as a wrath. We have Monument of Reckoning. That's a weird Silver Quill spell. Weird because Silver Quill in general looks like the fastest of the color pairs in terms of the most aggressive one. And yet it has a rare at 7 mana, 3 white, black. Choose up to 4 modes from the 2 that are given to you, and you can choose the same mode more than once. You can either destroy a non-land permanent or return a non-land permanent from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can kill 4 things and reanimate 0, kill 2, reanimate 2, and all the other combinations in between. You can decide whether it's better to demolish your opponent's threats and not put anything on board yourself, or maybe put a lot of things on board yourself and ignore opponent's threats, and so on and so on. An interesting card, and definitely a powerful one, because it can be a sort of plague wind, kill all your opponent's creatures stuff. We have also Vicious Rivalry. That's 2 black-green for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you pay X life. And then you destroy all artifacts and creatures with mana value X or less. So it's Toxic Deluge, but also can target artifact, or also can deal with artifacts, and you have to pay some life to cast it.
And an important point about that card: watch out for developing a plan where you want to play that as a wrath, and then there's the black-green Cauldron at rare that reanimates creatures. I watched a couple of players in pre-release play the Cauldron with the plan of, I'm going to wipe the board and get all my creatures back, and then they failed to realize that they were removing their own artifact, which got creatures back. It's just, you're going to see both of those rares a lot, and so just be aware of that interaction.
I mean, I wish I would see both of those rares a lot. Probably not going to happen to me.
I just mean that they're both regular rares. Neither is a mythic. You're going to encounter them a fair amount.
There's a couple. There's also like the white and black reanimate spell that you pay life when you cast it, and then you return creatures with mana value X to the battlefield.
Exactly X. Exactly X.
I had that, and I had to correct my opponent in the pre-release that they paid 4 life, and then they wanted to return their graveyard. I told them, no, just the 4. One of your 4 drops will come back, the rest not. Change it to 3 and kill me. Thank you very much. Which they did. I'm happy to report. So that was fun. But yeah, this one is weirdly, because I almost instinctively read it X or less, but it's actually X exactly. So it's whatever the blast zone rather than something else.
Wait. No, Vicious Rivalry is
Vicious Rivalry does X or less, but the white and black does X exactly.
Which that card's called Fix What's Broken, and it's kind of cute because it's the same characters in the art. You have the Witherbloom student and the Silverquill student.
Yep, but different approach to the word less in those 2 cards. Anyway, then we have Artistic Process, which is a sort of jack of all trades removal, or not removal if you don't need it. 5 mana for either dealing 6 damage to something or dealing 2 damage to each creature you don't control. So yours are safe from it, but opponents will not. Or create a 3/3 flying elemental creature with haste. So 3/3 haste flyer, 2 to everything opponents control, or 6 damage to target creature, which makes it pretty flexible. Even though it's a 5 mana spell, so not super exciting. However, 5 mana spells could be even more exciting with the splatter technique. The cost is tough, and you probably want to be deep in Prismari with some good fixing to play that card reliably. Splatter technique is 1 blue, red. So 5 mana in total. And you choose one of the modes. Either you draw 4 cards or deal 4 damage to each creature and planeswalker. And most of the time we would like the first mode. Obviously, drawing 4 cards is way better than winning a game of Magic, but sometimes you will resort to the sweeper mode and clear opponent's board of their things. And on top of that, if that was not enough, we also have cards on the bonus sheet. Strixhaven, just like the previous Strixhaven did, has spells exclusive bonus sheet. There will be 1 card of those in each pack, which means that we're actually going to see some of those. It's not that every 12 packs or so you get a card from the bonus sheet. It's literally in every pack. Luckily, sweepers are not that uncommon, which is good because uncommons are going to be probably 90% of what we're going to be seeing from the bonus sheet. But there are a couple of them at rare, including things like Brotherhoods and Culling Ritual. There's Winds of Abandon, which is, again, one-sided Wrath potentially. Cyclonic Rift, which is also tempo Wrath, if we may say so. There's Living End, which is kill everything, bring whatever was in the graveyard when Living End was cast back to the battlefield. So you can maybe engineer some situations when opponent doesn't have anything in the graveyard, when you have a stacked graveyard and you trade the boards. And there's Subterranean Tremors, which is Earthquake with some extra steps, including making a lizard if you have a lot of mana.
And that stack of 4 those are all mythics. So
yeah, those are all mythics.
Stacked together, you're going to almost never see those.
Yeah, like the rarities of the bonus sheet rares and mythics are less common than a main set rare.
Mythic,
right?
it's gonna be very rare. It's probably like 1/10 of the numbers that the normal mythics and rares are gonna be seeing. Okay, what next? Oh, there's Poke's Plague, and that's just don't ignore the card's existence. Just it doesn't. There are some cards in the sets that would be better if they would have like a sticker, not for limited purposes, because people's win rate would go up. And I'm pretty sure Poke's Plague is that one. I'm sure one of you is going to take it and do something fun and then put it on whatever your socials or brag in your WhatsApp group with your mates. Cool. We're happy for your happiness. Still, you probably didn't. You probably lost 4 games for each one that was won thanks to that. So there we go. In terms of the sizings of the creatures, Strixhaven, Secrets of Strixhaven is on the small removal does quite a lot side of the spectrum. So 50% of things are killed by 2 damage spell. Compared with other sets, this is on the top range of what's going on. TMT was on the low range of what was going on, with only 38% of the creatures fulfilling. This is on the higher end. 54 is maximum. This one has 50%. And there's things in between those two. It's even on the higher range of the 3 damage spell kills. 77% of common creatures. Maximum in the previous years was 80% for a couple of the sets. Minimum was 65. So that's the range we're talking about. And it's also on a higher range of things that 4 damage spell will kill. But here we have more like a duality. There are sets with common land cyclers, and these are the sets where 4 damage doesn't kill a lot because those land cyclers were usually on the larger side. And there are sets without the land cyclers, which are roughly 93-95% of the things are killed by a 4 damage spell, and no exception here in Secrets of Strixhaven with 93% of stuff killed by that.
But again, back on that slide for a second, we cannot stress enough that there's probably an unprecedented amount of +1/+1 counters and pumping going on in this set. It's just everywhere. And so these are, remember when you're looking at that these are all initial creature sizing. Very quickly, that 50% that's at 2 becomes a more at 3, becomes a more at 4, and out of range. So
scaling.
It starts there, which is good for initial removal, and we'll have some more comments on that later. But
there's
just
literally
remember
a
that
mechanic about growing.
Yes. Yeah. It's good in a school set, right? We like to grow and learn, don't we? It's good flavor.
I'm good.
And it's kind of interesting because it makes like the common like bounce surveil spell, like Betrayal or whatever that 2-mana blue one. it kind of becomes nice because it resets a creature that's grown too large. If you want to do the school metaphor, it bumps it back a year. You know, it makes it take the retake last semester.
Nice.
Yep. Does it even happen nowadays? Then we have comparison by actual sizing, and just to indicate two things maybe. First, 39% of the things in Strixhaven, Secrets of Strixhaven, are X2s, which means that they have X power but 2 toughness in general. 39 is a lot. No set since Wilders of Eldraine had more than 39. Which makes me hopeful for anything that deals 2 damage, that it will be more impactful. And yes, things are going to be scaling, but maybe not on the turn that they're cast, which means that it can actually deal with quite a lot of stuff in the short window that you have to deal with this stuff after it's been cast, but cannot be followed up by any kind of spell. Second of all, it's rather on the low size of the things that are more than 4 toughness, at common at least. And third thing, maybe around 2/3 of creatures are either X2s or X3s, which is quite a large fraction. There's very few sets that have a higher fraction of the things that have 2 and 3 toughness. Again, this shows to me that potentially the combats are going to be tight, and one trick that even gives +1/+1 will be something that can swing the combat quite dramatically. That's why I was telling about the black give something +1/+1, give something -1/-1, drain 1 life spell. It might be better than it was in OTJ. We had Skullduggery in OTJ and it was not great there. There is hope that it's going to be maybe slightly better here, especially with some life gain synergies, with targeting creature synergies and so on. Oh yeah, and then again, very few things with toughness 1. Very few. 11%. Only Lorwyn Eclipse was lower than that at 8%. And normal sets will have probably like 15 to 20% of the creatures with being X1s. Okay. So there are definitely new mechanics. And maybe someone else can take over and talk us through the new mechanics and give us some background on them before we move on to evaluating decks.
Yeah, I can talk about prepared. So the prepared creatures, you think about like, even WotC's other products and Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards coming in with prepared spells, right? That's kind of the flavor or the idea here. You have 38 creature cards that enter with an instant or sorcery spell on the bottom right of their card. And contrary to way pre-release belief, no, the creature cannot just cast Ancestral Recall at will. The creature, once prepared, can cast the spell exactly once, and when they do, they become unprepared. Some creatures enter prepared, and some don't. Some are easy to prepare, and some are more difficult to prepare. So you'll have a lot of creatures, especially a number of them at common. They'll come in prepared, and then they can cast a spell once, and there's no obvious way how to re-prepare them other than like reanimating or bouncing them. Other creatures, this is like
design feature, no? They want to make commons simpler to play with.
Yeah, exactly. The benefit here, of course, is that you're getting 2 cards in 1 card in a lot of ways. It's a way for them to up the instant and sorcery count in the set, which has all kinds of synergistic reasons that they want to do that without having to make you try to stuff more into your 40-card deck. And the really beautiful thing about this to me is, these 2-mode cards, we've seen them in a lot of different ways already. We've seen adventures, we've seen warp cards in Edge of Eternities, we've seen Omen cards in Dragonstorm. But if you think about what those cards had in common, all of those cards, to get the full value out of the card, you have to cast the spell side first. And then the creature comes later. And so you can often end up in these awkward spots. And in fact, that would greatly affect the number of those cards that you would want to play in your deck in a lot of cases, because, well, I can't afford to have these creatures where I'm going to lose a lot of the value if I just play the creature side straight out and I don't get the spell. I want to limit my my kind of variance with how that works. Well, in this case, the beautiful part is you get the creature first. So even if you vanilla test the thing, like look at some of these cards, you play Elite Interceptor for 1, you have a 1/2. That's not embarrassing. It's perfectly fine for you to have a 1/2. You play the Encouraging Aviator, you have a 2/3 flyer. It's not embarrassing. Like it's a card, blocks well, like it's fine, right? Oh, by the way, then you get to give another creature flying until end of turn. And you get to do that every time this attacks. So now all of a sudden it becomes an attacking flyer that, you want to play a flying tempo game in blue, like this helps you to do that. And so on down the line. And then the rarer cards, you end up getting entire plans that you can draft around, like Emeritus of Conflict, you see there in red, where you basically say to yourself, how can I craft my deck to be able to lightning bolt as many times as possible, maybe even twice in one turn. The fact that the creature comes first is going to remove a lot of the feel bad that has come with some of these cards in the past, where I don't feel like I'm getting the value out of the card. You get the creature first, and then all of a sudden the instants and the sorceries kind of become a bonus if you get to untap, or if you have enough mana to be able to do it on the turn that it comes in. And of course, increasing your instant and sorcery count, there's all kinds of excuses and reasons for wanting to do that in this set, as you'll see by the other mechanics that follow.
It comes with a different set of problems, though. No, if
Yeah,
I have my
that's what I
2-drop
wanna
that
say.
for 5 mana can draw 2 cards, I'm sort of incentivized not to trade it off, which is not always a good choice. And I will have to either choose of losing my future value for the sake of some board state gains now. Don't you think?
And like also, if you look at Encouraging Aviator or Scathing Shadelock, two of these examples that we have, these are effects that have been on creatures in the past that have just been activated abilities, or sometimes abilities that would just trigger on combat. Like we've seen 3 mana flyers that on attack throw something else in the air. We've seen like 5 or 4 mana black creatures that give a buff to some other creature in combat. And those cards have been fine, sometimes good, sometimes kind of mid. And now you have to spend a mana on this. Now,
Yeah, but you get I think that casting a spell is actually a benefit. Like
that's exactly
blue,
it.
it
Is
will
that
be Omen
there's
triggers,
Opus,
in
there's
black it's going
Increment.
to
Yeah,
Repartee
we'll
or
talk about all
flavor.
that.
Yeah, so yeah. I mean, there's pros and cons of that, and I think it's an elegant way of solving the design of the spell dense mechanics without having to increase the density of spells. Also, by the way, increased density of spells, which is also increased by the fact that we have a bonus sheet with exclusively instants and sorceries. That's another way that the design team has tried to do that. Okay.
Yeah, I think the point being that we've not seen those kinds of 2-mode cards, creature and spell, where the creature comes first before. It's very interesting design.
Yeah, really cool card.
Okay, Paradigm. Zach, do you want to talk about Paradigm?
Sure. I mean, I don't think this is going to be so much big part of the format because it's only on 5 mythics. Kind of think about Paradigm as a keyword. Like if you remember Duskmourn, the impending was on the 5 overlords, but that was the only instant of it in the set. It's kind of what they're doing here. Paradigm's calling back actually to, what is it, like Saviors of Kamigawa or something like that. The epic spells. There were 5 epic spells that when you cast them, they basically prevent you from casting any other spells, and then they cast that effect every turn. I remember there was the green one made like snakes every turn, and then you just swarm the board, but you couldn't cast any other spells. Now we have the 2026 power creep version of this, where you just get the effect and you don't have to get locked out of the game. So you cast this effect spell once, you get effect immediately, and then the spell kind of rebounds at the beginning of your first main phase. And they all range from maybe a little bit conditional, but consistent value to just kind of game warping, right? Like the green one is how if you have any board, it just puts 2+2+2+ counters every single turn. So these cards are probably going to be a grown test when your opponent plays them. And if you see them, pack one, pick one. Most of the times, you probably should take them, I'd want to say.
I don't know if I picked the white one, honestly, or even the blue one.
Sure. The white one's probably
Maybe
the finickiest of them, right? White and blue?
Yeah. I think I passed the white one in the early access quite. It was, I tried to play a more aggressive deck, and it just looked too expensive for that.
I had an opponent in pre-release who had a Lorehold red-white, very good aggro deck, and also had that card, and it was incredibly annoying to play against.
Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine that happening. Also, I think it's worth mentioning, you can cast them at the beginning of the main phase. You don't have to.
Sure.
It's
very relevant for the
things
black
like
one.
The black
which,
one, yeah. This is the one that you might want to skip casting a couple of times.
I mean, that said, though, you can also, because the black one does target a player, so you can have it give your opponent 2 cards and lose 2 life.
But if you are at 4 and your opponent at 16, you don't want to give them 2 extra cards to bury you, basically. So you might want to sit the Paradigm a couple of times. I mean, I'm not saying you're in a good state if you're skipping casting your Paradigm spell, but it's good that the option is there.
Well, and it matters with the red one too. I mean, you can prevent yourself from decking yourself also, right?
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, I mean, the Paradigm, powerful spells at Mythic. We will see them sometimes, and they will be annoying. Especially the green one is just. Ugh.
It's like you thought you hated Ouroboros in Standard. Well, wait till you have an Ouroboros you can't remove for the rest of the game. Oof.
I didn't hate Ouroboros in Standard. I'm on camera beating it with my VV deck, the fair VV.
Oh, the hero VV deck, right?
Exactly. The little person, and their small 0/3 creature.
A real David and Goliath story.
Increment is the next keyword. And this is also a take on the previous existing mechanic, sort of evolve. It mainly lives in Quandrix, which is the Simic, which is the blue-green. 9 cards, all in all, with 2 commons, 4 uncommons, and 3 rares/mythics. And these are the creatures that get a +1/+1 counter when you cast a spell and you spend mana on that spell, which is a greater number than either power or toughness of that creature. So you have, for example, Textbook Tabulator, a 0/3 on face of it. You cast a 1 mana spell, it becomes a 1/4 because 1 is greater than 0, which is its power. Once it's a 1/4, if you cast a 2 mana spell and you pay 2 mana for that 2 mana spell, it will become a 2/5, which is probably already a perfect stat line for a blue creature, so you don't want to be growing it further than that. It's a pretty simple, straightforward mechanic. Couple of things you need to remember. Mana reduction will make you not trigger your increment. So, for example, if you have a 3/5 Textbook Tabulator and you cast Run Behind on an attacking creature and you only pay 3 mana for that effect, instead of the 4, which is the full casting cost, you will not get your increment trigger. So you need to pay the mana. It's a very smart thing because it avoids a lot of the problems that, for example, Up the Beanstalk had. If Up the Beanstalk had that text, that card would have been legal and probably not playable in any constructed format if you would have to actually spend the 5 mana or more on a spell to get the extra card draw trigger. But you didn't, and because of that, people were casting 7 mana spells for 1 mana and drawing cards, and that's why the card was banned. This avoids that constructed problem while still being okay in limited environments. So that's a very neat design from that aspect. So obviously, you want to play those creatures and then follow it up by the nice curve out. So if you cast a 1/1 with Increment, you want to follow it up by 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop, and so on. This can happen multiple times per turn. So if you have a 1/1 Increment creature, you can cast a 2-drop and a 3-drop on the same turn, and it will grow twice. And it can also happen on your opponent's turn, which means that you can sort of combat trick an Increment token by casting a spell that costs, the right amount of mana. Be careful in paper if you're playing. This is a very easy to miss trigger, so make sure that you set yourself some reminders when you're casting spells that your Increment needs to increment, because it's easy to forget. All right, Tresio, do you want to talk us about Infusion?
Yeah, so these mechanics that we're into, each of the 5 schools, the 5 main color pairs, have their own ability word. Increment was for blue green for Quandrix, and here you get Infusion for Witherbloom and black green. All of these abilities keyed to the color pairs have roughly the same number of cards, and the Infusion is an ability that triggers if you gained life this turn, and it's from a rule standpoint, it's very important to note that this is not an intervening if, so you can gain life at instant speed between cast and resolve. That's going to be easier to deal with in paper than it will be on Arena. You need to be ready to hold priority on Arena in some cases. For example, if you we have Foolish Fate on the board. This is going to be a common interaction where this will come up. You cast Foolish Fate to destroy target creature. Infusion says if you gain life this turn, the creature's controller loses 3 life, which is kind of important. Like, that's going to be very good for you, right? And let's say you have Potioner's Trove, the mana rock on the board, down in the lower corner there. You cast Foolish Fate. You haven't gained life this turn, but while the cast of Foolish Fate is on the trigger, you have now cast an instant or sorcery. Notice that Potioner's Trove does not require that spell resolve yet. So you then tap the Trove, you gain 2 life, and all of a sudden Foolish Fate then resolves and Infusion triggers, and the controller loses 3 life. It's important not to miss those trigger situations, because obviously your opponent losing 3 life and things like that is a big deal. So there are that's one very common interaction I think that will come up, but it's important to pay attention to that. And so Trove, Dissection Practice are on this slide. They're important enablers that allow you to gain life at instant speed.
Are those all the ways? I mean, like, there's probably more ways to gain life at instant speed, right? Especially if you have that stupid frog.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much life gain in Witherbloom. I mean, 25 cards between black, green, and colorless, and there's just incidental life gain stapled onto a billion things. Like, just you'll be surprised. You'll look at a card and you'll be. I mean, one perfectly good example is the template that we have, the black 3 mana card. Target player loses 2 life and draws 2 cards. Right? I know we saw that in the Paradigm card, but yes, it still exists just as a black, I think, sorcery, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like that one has, oh, by the way, it adds a counter to something. There's a lot of cards that you'll be surprised to see, like, oh, I gain 1 life on this. Like, that's great. Right. So it would be, a good exercise for people to just go to Scryfall and look up the Witherbloom cards and start counting how many things just have +1 life tacked on. There's lots of them, and how many of them are at instant speed. So yeah.
And also, like, big change I think that is worth maybe noticing for the Infusion is that pests are templated differently in this set than in the previous one. In the original Strixhaven, pests gained you life on death trigger. The current pests are gaining you life on attack triggers, so you can always get it. Before that, the problem with Witherbloom was sometimes that, oh, I have those pests, now I will attack them, opponent will block, one of them will die, I'm going to gain life, and then something can happen. But often when you have things like that, opponent is smart enough not to block and just take some damage and ignore the pests.
Right.
And here they don't have that option. So I think that things that can gain you life without any mana input are going to be extra premiums, especially when you like playing, I don't know, if you're playing a thing like Old Growth Educator. It's a 4 mana 4/4 that has Infusion. It becomes a 6/6. Obviously, it's nicer to cast it on turn 4, which means that you need to have some kind of a life gain trigger that doesn't cost you mana in order to cast it on turn 4. And, attacking Suicide Attack with the Pest might be exactly the right thing to do that. Or, yep.
Well, and there's been lots of complaining about, oh, that's so much worse of the pests, like that they don't die and whatever. But it's actually very important in this set, specifically because you can force the issue like that. Your opponent gets to choose whether or not potentially that creature dies. They don't get to choose whether you decide to attack with it and you gain the life, and all of a sudden, like, your efflorescence trick is now giving trample and indestructible to something that you actually care about.
Exactly. And I think that also there's a couple of things that cost 1 mana and gain you life. These might also be interesting for the same reason that they can be counted. Like, there's the green 1 mana spell that just draws you a card, gains you a life, and does it do something else?
It gives you +1/+1 until end of turn.
Oh, +1/+1 to a creature.
But
It does a lot of very, very small things that,
yes.
I mean, they are worth a card because you're getting a card back. But you can treat it as almost as if in infusion kicker. You add extra green, you get your infusion trigger. So you can cast your Old Growth Educator and gain 1 life. It is a 6/6, and then you give +1/+1 to something. And then you draw a card, so you replace.
And then you trigger Repartee.
And triggers Repartee if
well,
you
and I mean, you were talking about dissection practice earlier. I mean, just look at Thornfist Striker in the middle of the board, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm safe. Their creatures are not buffed and do not have trample this turn. And then you play dissection practice mid combat for whatever reason that you choose to, and all of a sudden, for 1 mana, you've gained life, and your whole team has trample.
Yep, and maybe your pest even is a 3/2 trampler that they thought that will be eaten without consequences.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Opus is the next ability. Zach, do you want to go about Opus?
Sure. I mean, Opus is kind of like sort of a prowessy ability. It essentially is prowess if for instance in sorceries, but usually it's like give something +1/+1 or +1/+0. It might be something else. You get some benefit whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, essentially. And then if you cast an instant or sorcery which you spent 5 mana, again, there's the spent mana wording, right? It's not a 5 mana value spell. If you spend 5 mana on that instant or sorcery, you get another bonus effect. And sometimes these are, as we'll see, the Prismari decks, some of these Opus triggers are leaning more aggressive, like the Expressive Fire Dancer. It gets +1/+0, so it's prowess, more or less. And then if you spent 5 or more mana, it gets Double Strike. So a very aggressive creature. And sometimes it's more card advantage.
Just to clarify, when you cast the 5 mana spell, it both gets +1/+1 and Double Strike. Yeah.
Yes. You get the. Sometimes they will say like get something else instead. There's like the Tackle Artist or whatever that gets a counter when you Opus, and then if it's 5, you spend 5 or more mana, it gets 2 counters instead. So
we have the Spectacular Skyway that has literally instead text, but if it doesn't say instead, both things happen. If there is instead, only one happens. Spectacular Skyway, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, gets +3/+0 until end of turn. But if 5 mana or more was spent to cast that spell, it gets 3 +1/+1 counters instead. Yep. So it gets permanent buff and also buff to toughness rather than just power buff and temporary.
But I just want to highlight that there are some of these Opus creatures, like they get stat buffs, they get combat abilities, like the Fire Dancer and the Sky Whale. But then there are others like the Mascot, which does get a buff like to power. It gets a +1/+1 buff. But its Opus trigger, if you spend 5 or more mana, is that it impulse draws. It you flip the top card of your library, you can cast until the end of your next turn. So that's more of a card advantage mid-rangey ability. It's very rare to get like card advantage on your common this kind of way. Or you have Muse Seeker, which will Opus trigger. It doesn't get any power combat buff. It doesn't get any power or toughness. It will just have you loot, draw a card and then discard a card. But if you spend 5 or more mana, you don't have to discard a card. You just straight draw a card. So this like pushes Prismari to be like all flavors of Prismari care about spells. But you have to ask yourself in the draft, am I building this aggressive prowessy style Prismari deck? Or am I building this more late game value accumulation Prismari deck?
Yeah. I think that Prismari decks also are slightly... We're going to see that when we look at the ramp, but there is a slight... Weirdly, there is an Is It ramp package in the set on the side of the regular green ramp package, and that Is It or Prismari ramp packages, I'm sure designed for you to be able to spend that 5 mana relatively quickly.
What's also nice is that, like, if you are the more aggressive version of the deck, you don't necessarily have to put in like a bunch of 7-mana spells in your deck, because you'll have prepare creatures that have bodies that then will have stapled onto them effects that cost 5 or 6 mana that will trigger your, your writer text on your Opus creatures.
Okay, let's move to the Repartee.
Mm-hmm.
Shall I take that one?
Sure.
I mean, Repartee is a silver quill mechanic for the school. 12 cards have it. All are in white black. 3 commons, 6 uncommons, 3 rares and mythics. Repartee triggers when you cast. So, does it get countered? Does it fizzle? Doesn't matter. You got the trigger on the cast. An instant or sorcery only that targets a creature, and it can be any creature. Yours, opponents, doesn't matter. If there is multiple targets on one spell, it doesn't matter. It's still one spell that targets a creature. It just targets multiple, but you can only one Repartee trigger. And a Repartee will do what it says on the card. So it will be different things for different cards. Sometimes it's just put a +1/+1 counter on something. Like Graduation Day has just literally, it's a white enchantment for white mana, and when you have cast a sorcery or instant that targets a creature for some reason, you can just put a +1/+1 counter on any creature that you control. Scalding Administrator, same thing, but puts counters on itself when you Repartee. Doesn't matter if the administrator is the target of the spell or something else, it will still get a counter. Some of them will do different other things, like Informed Increment, which is a rare, that will make 1/1 flyers every time you target something, which seems quite powerful. Melancholic Poet is draining 1 life whenever you target something. Inkling Mascot just gets flying and the ability that and Surveil 1 whenever you target something. So and there will be different, like something blinks. It will depend on the individual card. You have to read what the Repartee does in this particular thing. And then yes, as Tresio did the maths there, and math teacher, so we have to trust it by law. There are 27 instant or sorcery cards in Silver Quill that are targeting creatures. 8 of those being prepared spells, and prepared spells do count, because despite prepared mechanic creating a copy of a spell somewhere in the limbo, you're still casting that copy. That copy is not put on stack as already cast. You have to actively cast it, which means that the trigger goes on stack. A bit of a rule magic in there. And also some of those prepared creatures, they actually retrigger their preparedness, which means that you can cast it over and over and over again, like we saw the 4/6 black creature that just gets prepared at the beginning of every turn that you have, or at the beginning of every combat you have. So I played against a couple of Silver Quill decks in the pre-release and in the early access. Never had a problem with casting spells that would trigger Repartee, my opponents. There's a huge density of them. You can have the huge density of those spells without compromising the creature density in your deck, thanks to those prepared spells. And it was quite oppressive, I have to say. I was impressed by the power level of some of those cards. Looks pretty strong.
Well, and also just think about the typical color identity of white and black, right? White wants to buff its own things. Black wants to remove your opponent's things. Like, that's just naturally there anyway, besides all of the cards that they've put in to make sure, you know, that's just a consistent thing about this format and these color pairs is, do not worry about if Wizards has built enough ways to do the thing into the color pairs. There are plenty of ways. Witherbloom has tons of ways to game life. Silver Quill has tons of ways to trigger Repartee. You are not going to be lacking for options.
Yeah, and then Prismari will have plenty of ways to trigger Opus. Both for
sometimes
5 mana
multiple
and
times a turn, even on 5 mana. Yeah.
Yep. Next mechanic is a returning one, the goody classic flashback. Tresio?
Yeah. So this is the thing that really makes Lorehold go. Lorehold doesn't get a new keyword; it gets an old one. But please throw away anything that you know about Lorehold from original Strixhaven. Just put it out in the back basket. Like, when I went to pre-release on Friday, there were Lorehold boxes
No
sitting
one even
everywhere.
remembers what Lorehold was doing 5 years ago.
Well, I never.
They're magic boomers at this point.
I never even played the set. That was in my 25-year hiatus, and I still have people who have told me, "Oh, Lorehold," and they tried to do this graveyard thing and it didn't work. It is not. Just don't even. It's not even the same conversation. Lorehold is a very successfully built color pair in this set. Flashback is exactly what you want to be doing. It's for the most part cheap spells with, and a lot of them even have very cheap flashback costs. I mean, Dig Site Inventory is going to be a great enabling card. Play it for one, flash it back for one. It doesn't really matter what it's doing. It really doesn't matter because you have so many cards in Lorehold, as you'll see when we get into the skeletons later, that care about things coming out of the graveyard. But flashback is just this known mechanic that's good for getting things out of the graveyard. And then you also have the new card Flashback. Please be aware of this card. In a very real way, your opponent may have a deck where every card in their graveyard has Flashback. I mean, all the instants and sorceries, I should say, and they have them at instant speed. So just that card's existence is going to change a lot of things. But even without them having that rare, there are plenty of very efficient ways for them to be getting things out of the graveyard. And if you think about what a typical Boros aggro deck wants, well, what is it typically lacking? It's lacking card advantage, and sometimes it will run out of gas. Well, flashback cards help it to not run out of gas because all of a sudden you don't care how many cards you have in your hand because you've got 4 castable cards in your graveyard. Some of them will bring creatures back. Some of them will create creature tokens. Some of them will draw cards. Some will kill things. And notice that some flashback costs will be large enough to trigger the major opus ability. Like Tome Blast, for example, is going to be a card you're going to see a lot. And it's not an accident that its flashback cost is exactly 5. There are 10 Lorehold cards that care about cards leaving your graveyard and being put into exile, but 8 of them are uncommon and uncommon, which means you're going to see them a lot. So Wizards redesigned this school of magic, so to speak, inside Strixhaven, and I think it's been done very successfully. I saw a lot of very good, very aggressive, kill you by turn 6 Lorehold decks in both early access and at pre-release.
Okay, cool. Do we have any other mechanics to cover? Converge. Oh, the build around one, Zaki.
Oh, I mean, sure. This is a great dream to chase, and in fact, this happened to me at pre-release where my opponent mind twisted me for 4 with Arcane Omens. So, what is Converge? Converge, I guess, is a magic mechanic from one of the Zendikar sets. I want to say from before I was really playing. But it sort of exists in the trio of like 5 color magic mechanics. There's Domain, Vivid, and Converge. They all kind of doing slightly different things. And Converge cares about the colors that you spend to cast this spell. If you play Modern, there's Prismatic Ending, which is a card that's played in a lot of Modern decks, which is just exile target non-land permanent with mana value equal to less than or equal to the number of colors you spend to cast the spell. And so this is sort of like the pushing you towards the 5 color archetype. There's a lot of these Converge spells at uncommon. There's a couple of colorless at uncommons, and they scale with the amount of mana, with the amount of mana that you want, that your colors of mana that you're able to cast for them. And some of these are quite powerful. I think like Snarl Song, this green one over here is one of the most powerful ones. It's 6 mana, and it creates 2/0/0 fractal creature tokens with X counters on them, and you gain X life, where X is the number of colors you spend to cast them. So if you spend 3, then you get 2 3/3s and gain 3. It's pretty good. But once you're spending 4, you get 2 4/4s, you gain 4. Now you're like going above rate. And if you're able to spend 5, then that's just gravy. Some of these are weaker, like Archaic Agony is like much more conditional. You do X damage, and then you sort of impulse draw off of the excess damage done. But like if you're spending, you really have to get to like 4 or 5 different colors, because otherwise you have a 5-mana spell that's maybe doing 3 damage to a creature and you're trying to do excess damage. It becomes very conditional at sorcery speed. So this is sort of like a backdoor strategy / build around for the multicolor decks.
Yeah, I think that the rare is particularly strong. That 6 mana, deal X damage, draw X cards, gain X life.
Yes,
that one is just like, probably this is the reason to get into that deck when you open this and then you just go all in. I also think that there are 2 ways of building this deck. One will be green-centric with basic land fixing. There is plenty of mechanics that can get you those basic lands, which we're going to get through when we talk about ramp and fixing strategies. And there's going to be more like an is-it strategy when you can actually make some treasures and get your extra mana from the treasures, where green one maybe will be more all-in on the Converge, and the Prismari will be, I have a powerful card, I will cast it for some value. Yeah, beware of the auto tapper as well. I was playing the cube, and there's always something wrong going with my prismatic ending casting. So yeah, manual tap things just for the security of it, and that even doesn't guarantee that it's gonna work out fine. Talking about mana fixing and ramp, I have divided this slide into 2 wide categories. They are not like precise math. As in taxonomy, there is always some gray areas, but this is more in the Quandrix or Sultai sector of the set. I think that we have 2 cards that are absolute bangers in Studio's First Year. That's a green for a 1/1/1 drop, and for 2 mana it can cast Rampant Growth, which means you search your library for any basic and put it on the battlefield tapped. And there is Environmental Scientist. That's a 2 mana 2/2, and when it enters, you can search your library for a basic and put it in your hand. These cards just look absolutely sick in terms of color fixing and making sure you hit your lands or even ramping you. Studio's First Year is the card that I was thinking when I wrote in the chat that it's not going to be unrealistic to cast a 5 mana Converge spell for Converge 4 on turn 4, because you turn 1 bear, turn 2 get the land that is rare in your deck, and if you are having the right combination of other basics that you drew, you easily cast turn 4 Converge spell with 4. And there's a couple of other maybe less common versions of ramping or fixing your mana. There's 2 mana dorks in well, the 1 mana dork in Topiary Lecturer. Oh, there's actually the frog missing from that slide. I was looking, there are 2 mana dorks. There is a 2 mana Death Touch 1/2 frog that will also ramp you, which didn't even make on our slides. That's how much ramping and fixing is there in the set. We have 10 cards, and 1 is clearly missing in the green sector. We have 10 cards in the red sector, red-blue sector, let's call it. But Topiary Lecture is the uncommon one. It's a 1/2 increment creature. It grows whenever you cast spells that have, that you paid more than 1 mana for. It starts growing, and then it taps for the amount of green equal to its creature's power, which means it can ramp you really fast. Like you cast it on turn 3, on turn 4 you can cast a 2-drop, and then it taps for 2 mana, which means you can still cast for a 4-drop after that, which is pretty a good output from that creature. And next turn it will tap for 3 mana. You can go to really big spells. There are a couple of higher rarity things. There's still 1 common. And Embrace the Paradox. That's a 5 mana instant. You draw 3 cards and you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, which sort of ramps you into very high numbers of mana, but it gives you also cards to cast afterwards. So it's very similar to the Lessons of Life from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's not a sorcery, but it costs 1 more mana. So time will tell us how good that card is. But it looks like there will be decks where it has its spots. And ramping to 6-7 mana is not a problem if you have a full hand of spells. There's a Zimon's Experiment, which is sort of like a weird ramp version of Stock Up in a way. Planar Engineering, the Mega Harrow. Sacrifice 2 lands, search your library for 4 basic lands and put them on the battlefield tapped, which can get you drastically from being mono green to having all 5 colors of mana on board in an easy way. Proctor's Gaze, that's 4 mana for bounce a permanent to its owner's hand, and then search your library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield tapped. So like a mixture of Boomerang and Rampant Growth. Quite an interesting card. Conditional Ramp, but Mind Roots is one of them. That's a 3 mana Golgari spell. Target player discards 2 cards, and if they discard a land, you can put one of the lands that they discarded onto the battlefield under your control tapped. So you steal a land that your opponent was forced to discard. Not always will ramp you, but if it doesn't, then at least you got 2 spells under your opponent's hand, which is not a terrible thing. And there's Strixhaven Sky Coach, which is a vehicle. It's a 3 mana 3/2 flyer, has a crew of 2, but when it enters, you may search your library for a basic and put it in your hand. I think that the card might be undervalued in the big mana decks, at least initially. It's similar in its philosophy, I think, to
what was that card in Aether Drift?
Marshall's Path Cruiser from Aether Drift, which was a very good card because the fact that it draws a card that compensates a lot for the expensive crew cost, and 2 crew for a 3/2 flyer is quite expensive, but hopefully you will be able to get some value out of that. So plenty of the mana fixing and ramp, and I still missed out on the 2 mana 1/2 Death Touching Frog that taps for green as a ramp strategy, which looks to be like one of the better green commons actually. And then we have a completely different set of ramp in red/blue that focuses more on treasures and casting instant sorceries. It does exist though, and it looks pretty potent. We have like things like Goblin Glassrite, a 2-drop 2/2 that has a prepared spell that it can cast whatever it comes prepared, so you can cast it whenever you want to. Just red mana to make a treasure, and later you can use that treasure as a ramp spell, so you sort of store mana for later. Seize the Spoils, also draw 2, discard a card, draw 2, and then make a treasure on top of that. That will also ramp you. Resonating Loot is a rare, but that doubles the amount of mana your lands produce if you want to be casting instant or sorcery spells. So that's a ramp for instants and sorcery. There are 2 artifact mana rocks, one of them on the creature. So there's a 2 mana 0/2 that taps for colorless in Page Loose Leaf. And there's Potioner's Trove, the thing that Tresio mentioned. It's a mana rock for 3 mana, like the usual ones. But you can also choose to tap it to gain 2 life. You can activate that only if you cast instant or sorcery spell. So that fits into the instant or sorcery mana fixing, because you probably want to mix up ramping to something with ability to sometimes gain life. Hydro Channeler, 2 mana 1/3. It can tap for blue that you can spend on instants or sorcery, or it can filter mana. So 1 tap, add 1 mana of any color, again to cast instants or sorceries only. And there's a couple of other cards in red. Rabble Rouser is a 3 mana 1/4 that can exile a card from your graveyard to tap and add red, and then you ping opponent for 1 on top of that. And Blazing Fire Singer is a 3-drop 2/3, and it has a prepared spell of Seething Song, which is 2 and a red, and the effect of the spell is add red, 5 mana. Tablet of Discovery, another mana rock. It's a 3 mana rock at uncommon. It taps for red, and it can tap for double red, but you can only spend it on instants and sorcery, so it can double ramp you. You can cast it on turn 3, and then on turn 4 you can cast a 6 mana of instants and sorceries. And Abstract Paint Mage, blue hybrid Izzet red for a 2/2, and at the beginning of your first main phase you add blue and a red, and you can only spend it to cast instants or sorcery. So as you can see, a lot of this blue and red ramping is there, but only will ramp you to instants and sorceries, just strengthening the notion of how important these 2 types of spells are going to be in the set. And lastly, there are some lands. There is a common cycle of the Surveil lands. They are different from the original Strixhaven. The original Strixhaven ones had tap to add one of the school's colors, or 4 and a tap to surveil one. Now they made them harder to be used as a splash source and being used when you're splashing them, because now they need 2 and 1 of each of the school's colors to tap and surveil one. So for example, the Lorehold one taps for red and white, and then for 2 red and white and tapping it, you can surveil one. So if you're splashing it in your Silverquill deck, well, if you don't have the red source from somewhere else, you won't be able to do the surveilling. You also have a rare cycle of the slow lands. So these are dual lands that enter tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. So on turn 1 and turn 2, they will come into the play tapped, and on turn 3 onwards, they will come, but most of the time they will come untapped. I mean, unless you miss one of your first 2 land drops, which means that you're in a bad situation anyway. There's also Terramorphic Expanse, so our Evolving Wilds variant, and there is Great Hall of the Biblioplex. It's a land that can turn into a creature permanently. It taps for a colorless, or taps, pay 1 life, add 1 mana of any color, but you can only spend that mana on instants and sorceries, and then for a 5 mana it turns into a 2/4 creature with pseudo prowess. I mean, gets +1/+0 for each instant and sorcery you cast. So these are the lands that will allow you splashing. It's not like an impressive collection, but the lands are in the land slot, so you're gonna see a good amount of them, especially since there are only 5 of them. There is also another theme that is not really mechanistic, but there is a ton of gold cards in the set. So maybe Tresio can walk us through that.
Yeah, 77 gold cards. 15 at common. We've had sets where we only have 15 gold cards, or like 15 to 20 gold cards. There's 15 at common, just at common. You're going to be playing a lot more gold cards than usual, almost no matter what you do. So plan your mana bases accordingly. The traditional idea of, having 2 tap lands in your mana base is pretty safe and limited. You actively want 2 tap lands in your mana base, and then your decision is going to be, which way, how do I want to go 8 and 7, and that's often going to be what your mana base looks like. And it's probably not even going to be terrible for you if you have 3 tap lands in your mana base, because you're going to have so many times. I mean, look at Spirit Mascot, look at Inkling Mascot, look at Bogwater Luminette. You're going to have so many times where you want to be casting those things on turn 2, and you need 1 of each color of mana to do it, obviously. And so you need to be aware of that. You're going to need both colors of mana to cast way more of your cards than is typically the case. And there are some format defining 2-drops in that way. We tried to put them on this slide, but notice which color pairs don't have them. That kind of already gives you an idea of what certain color pairs are wanting to do, getting on board with a impactful 2, or maybe not. Please don't play Terrafractal on turn 2 unless for some reason your opponent already has you at 1 life. But Zach already talked about the Elemental Mascot and what it's trying to do. That's kind of Prismari's 2-drop, so to speak. But it's happening at 3. But also, both Silverquill and Witherbloom have 3-drop gold creatures at common. So curving out in those color pairs is just trivial. I mean, and who else is taking those creatures?
If you hit the lands.
Yeah, if you have the lands, which is, again, why you need your mana base to be strong in that way. Mm-hmm. But you should expect that. You should build toward that when you're in those color pairs. It's not going to be hard for you to pull that off. It's not going to be hard for you to curve out in those colors. And you should expect that when you face an opponent that's in those colors, don't be surprised when you see, oh, they're playing Bogwater Luminette on 2 as a Witherbloom player, and then they're playing the Pest on 3 as a Witherbloom player. You're just going to see that in a lot of games. And so that's defining your rules of engagement for you in the format. Like that's what you're dealing with and playing with when you have those decks.
There's also this colorless card. I forget what it's called. The 2-drop that scales whenever you play a colorless card, a multicolored card.
Yeah, That's a
Which-
2/1.
Yeah, and I think
2/1
it's going to be a
scales.
non-zero, that card, because you are going to end up in a deck that has like 11 multicolor spells sometimes because your
Mhm.
school was open and you're the only drafter on the pod that was interested in those cards. You're going to get them in pack 2 and 3.
Well, and I think in a lot of cases that card's going to come up when you're getting toward the end of the draft and you're maybe a little bit light in the 2 spot for what you'd like. And then you look and you say, well, I have 10 multicolor cards.
Yeah.
That's going to happen a lot. And then you say, oh, it's totally fine for me to take this 2/1. It's going to function in my deck.
If it's a 3/2 attacker on the first turn that it attacks, it's fine. Because the 2/1 blocker is still probably going to take down their 2-drop if you need to block.
And if it
And
ever
if
gets
not,
up to
then-
like 4
and
toughness,
if it
then it's
goes
a serious
unchallenged,
problem.
yeah. Okay. There are more gold cards in this uncommon, so continue, please.
Yeah, so 35 gold uncommons. This is where most of the gold cards are constant. 35! Okay.
Yeah, isn't there
In
like
a set
100
that
uncommons?
has-
So a third of uncommons are gold. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're equally distributed, 7 per color pair. I mean, we will talk about, oh, look, this is a set that has 2 signposts per color. Now granted, that's across 10 archetypes, but that would still be 20. Like, I mean, there's so many gold cards, and the cards, we put the cards on this slide that fit each school's theme particularly well. There are some uncommons for each gold uncommons for each color pair that are more niche, certainly. But these cards are showing you what is this color pair trying to do, right? I mean, Rapturous Moment, what's going on? Hey, it's an Opus spell that lets you cast another Opus spell in the same turn. And oh, by the way, it's drawing cards so that you can draw the Opus spell that you might not have in your hand yet. Killian's Confidence is letting you repartee 9 million times in a row. And yes, it will do that. I mean, this is Killian's Confidence reminds me of what's the one blue-black enchantment that would keep going back to
Information campaign.
yeah that's like the version of that card. Corporate wants you to tell the difference between these two cards.
The aggro version of it.
The aggro version.
The aggressive brother of the
If you have any doubts about this card, can it just go off? It's a really, really good card. So then you might wonder, like, what's the signpost? So think about that when you're drafting. Don't just say, oh, well, wow, I opened this pack and there are like 2 Prismari uncommon gold cards in this pack. Yeah, how many were there to begin with? I mean, you can't necessarily look and say, oh, I see this, really good uncommon in these colors. It's not going to be quite that obvious.
Okay, we have also the charms, which are another cycle of the gold cards. Zach, you want to cover the charms?
Sure, just briefly. We've talked about some of these before, like the Silver Quill Charm and the Witherbloom Charm. But charms have a long history in Magic. They always have 3 modes, and you're usually there's like, for a successful charm, it's either there's one mode that's really useful, and the other 2 are sort of like bonuses are conditional, or that all 3 modes are pretty useful, but maybe a little bit below rate. And so I think all of these charms, without like reading through all of them, I think they're all going to find their way to their college. These are not going to be cards that you really want to splash, I don't think, or play in like a multicolor mixy deck. But you're never going to be embarrassed to play them. Some are going to be a little more conditional. I think like the Quandrix Charm, you might like not always play in your Quandrix decks, for example. Like most of the time it's just essentially a quench, right? But like, the Prismari Charm, it's going to find some utility. The Silver Quill Charm is always going to find something to do. The Lower Hold Charm might be a little bit more finickier. But I think
they all go in.
Go ahead.
And I think that Quandrix Charm, this is probably the best set for a quench since times unremembered.
Sure.
Because there's like so many things to be done. They can counter the prepared spell, which will often be something that your opponent will be playing towards and will want to cash in on pronto. And also, as I think Tresio wrote that slide, so Quandrix is not really famous for its 2-drops, and Quench is an excellent 2-drop. So
Sure.
I'm not going to be unhappy about that. And yeah, I mean, Witherbloom Charm always can buy out late in the game and draw you 2 cards by sacrificing a land that you don't need at all. And early in the game, it just kills their 2-drop, which is absolutely what you want to be doing early in the game. Lorehold Charm, if you manage to build a go wide Lorehold deck, the third option on it,
Yeah.
everything +1/+1 and trample, is amazing. But instant speed of getting a creature back from your graveyard and triggering all those graveyard leaving triggered abilities is also a pretty neat trick. So the first option is probably pretty bad, but sometimes it will come useful. When it becomes useful, it's going to be very useful.
Well, and yeah, that first option in Lorehold Charm is going to be used by far the least. But like you mentioned earlier, this is a set with very few enchantments and very few artifacts, which means the artifacts you do actually care about, a lot of times it's going to be the only one on the battlefield. Like when you're playing Witherbloom and they're playing the Cauldron and they drop the rare Cauldron, it's very unlikely they're going to end up with a second artifact on board at any point.
Yeah.
So
or you loot in red blue, or the arc in the white red.
Yeah.
These are all going to be on the oppressive side, and they're going to be like high rarity cards. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean the red is the color most likely to have trinkety artifacts sitting around with the treasure makers, but
there might be treasures, so you
Yeah.
don't want that. A non-token doesn't work. It doesn't care about treasures.
Oh,
yeah, that's true. That's true. I missed that.
There we go.
Very
It
good.
still works. The system is fixed. They thought about that. It's almost as if they are thinking about designing those sets. Shocking. Talking about thinking about designing the sets, I see a segue that naturally came to be. I listened to the Drive to Work with Mark Rosewater, and it was an interview with the lead design of the set, Reggie Falk. And they confirmed what I thought about it when I started looking at the spoiler. My hypothesis was that it looks like there are two versions of each of the deck. Each school will have two different builds. And that's what Reggie confirmed in the interview, that each pair has seeded two variants of the deck, a more aggro version and a bit more slow version. And this is my example of cards that I would see in the aggro version of Quandrix. Things like Cuboid Colony, a 2-mana 1/1 increment that can grow pretty fast. It's flying and trample. It can get out of hand very quickly. And especially, you can go turn 1 Cuboid Colony, turn 2 Growth Curve on the Cuboid Colony. Now on turn 3 you're attacking with the 5/5 flyer. This is the kind of like super aggressive curve out that you can build using 2 uncommons in the Quandrix deck. But that was my hypothesis looking at the card list, that every one of them you can build aggressive and maybe a bit more controlling. And good to hear that confirmation from the set designer that they literally planned to do that because they wanted to add more gameplay to a set that only has 5 schools rather than the 10 archetypes. So it will be interesting how much it plays out. And I'm pretty sure that, aggressive version of Quandrix is not going to be the most common one, but once in a blue moon you're going to get it, and maybe it's worth to start thinking about this whole set from that perspective to get yourself prepared to those kind of speed determines what you're doing in each color pair, rather than thinking about a color pair as a monolith like we normally do. I think that this may be the set where it finally works like that there are different versions of each deck. And here, as a sort of like alternative to the Cuboid Colony and Growth Curve, I gave you Fractal Tender and Tam Observant Sequencer as the sort of cards representing the slower end of the spectrum for the Quandrix decks. Fractal Tender being a 5-drop 3/3 with Ward 2 with Increment, and then if you triggered Increment on that at the end of your turn, you make a 3/3 Fractal. A card that is not very fast, but will take over the long game. This is not something you want to have in your aggro deck, but you want to build the deck in order to stabilize, and once you've stabilized, you can start churning out those fractals and take over the game. And same with Tam, that's like a bad Tatyova version, so 4-mana 4/3, and whenever a land you control comes into play, it becomes prepared, and then its spell is green-blue, draw a card, gain a life, sort of situation.
Yeah, and I think your point there about the, what defines fast and slow is really important. That if you start from a baseline of like how fast or slow generally do you think of these color pairs? Like, okay, you think of green, blue as slower by nature, right? If you think of fast and slow as like turning the dial on that color pair either direction, like, yeah, Quandrix fast is probably not going to be as fast as the other color pair's fast is, but it's going to be significantly faster than the slow version of Quandrix. And I think out of all 5 of the color pairs, in my experience, the Lorehold is where you're going to feel this the least, because Lorehold is kind of 2 close flavors of aggressive in like, more graveyard carrying and go wide. And a lot of times those are going to blend together. I think Lorehold's going to feel like one deck more often. But this is the preponderance of gold cards is a big thing that I think is going to give this a really good chance of working where maybe it hasn't before, because there are just so many ways to be rewarded and paid off in your color pair if you choose either the fast lane or the slow lane.
And so I also made one slide showing like examples of the super fast Lorehold cards, like Group Project, Dig Site Inventory, the thing that puts counters on things and gives them
kind of like travel prep,
and then Living History. In a fast version of Lorehold, these probably are going to be important cards. And then you have some cards that are slow, like Ajani's Response. That's a removal that costs 3 less if it targets a tapped creature. If you're attacking, likely your opponent is not attacking you, so you cannot cast Ajani's Response for 2 mana. If you're a defensive deck, well, perfect time to cast Ajani's Response. You really will actively want to have any number of copies of that. Arc of Hunger, like a slow late game value engine, obviously you want it in a deck that plays a longer game, so you want to have something slower for that. And what is it called? Something research, primary research? I covered the name of it very strategically. But that thing is slow. I mean, it's 5 mana enchantment, it returns a 3-drop to the battlefield, and you start drawing cards every time something leaves your graveyard on a turn. This is a slow value engine for the late game, and I can imagine that those cards don't always want to be in the same deck. That's the basic split between them, and that has led me to design the slides introducing each color pair in a slightly different way than we normally do, and you're going to see that in a second. But after talking about the actual set designer's design philosophy, we want to also talk about what we are going to call Tresio hypothesis of this Strixhaven set. So maybe you can walk us through this, your snowball design and what you see and how the set is designed yourself.
I believe you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. So we talk often about snowball cards, and a lot of times we have like B-level good cards that it's like, well, if you can untap with it, this can snowball out of control quickly, and you have to be ready to deal with that. I think we have here a snowball set, because in both in early access and in pre-release, just every color pair has the potential to snowball very, very quickly, both for and against you. And so I think this really sets the rules of engagement of this set that, Sirkovitz wrote there, you need to be prepared for the worst scenarios. You basically need to be prepared. Your opponent is very likely going to snowball somehow during the game. And sometimes that's going to be very obvious that it's happening quickly, in a more aggressive color pair like red-white or white-black, okay? But, if you let Witherbloom's life gain grow out of control, all of a sudden they're going to be at 35 life and their creatures are going to be huge. So you need to be prepared for that, and you have to make sure that your deck has some way of snowballing and accruing value over the course of the game. Because otherwise, you will get to later turns and you will just lose. There are just too many ways to pull that off in this set. Really, whether you're playing a fast deck or a slow deck, the fast decks are going to snowball to a smaller degree, but much faster. And so you need to deal with their early threats. The slower decks are going to snowball, but when they do, it's going to get powerful. I mean, I remember a Prismari deck that I played against in early access, and it seemed like they were doing nothing. And then all of a sudden they cast 4 omen spells in one turn and the game was over and they had like 900 3/3 flyers. I mean, it's out of nowhere. Like, where did this come from? Well, that was just, it was a fast snowball rolling down the hill at you that you thought the hill was just this calm, snowy hill, right? I mean, so what that means for you is that things like proactive removal may be the way to deal with particular creatures. When I was playing in pre-release, I was playing a Silver Quill deck that you'll see later, and I was playing against a Lorehold player who had multiple copies of Spirit Mascot. Well, when I was on the draw, there were a lot of times where I had Silver Quill Charm in hand that could destroy a creature of power 2 or less as one of its modes, and I had 2 very viable 2s that I could, and in another format, I might just play out my 2, and then, why waste my removal on this thing, right? No, you learn very quickly, you need to remove that Spirit Mascot right now because it's going to be out of range in about 2 seconds, and then you may not have a way to deal with it later. So you just need to be aware, I think, that this is the way that this format is constructed. It feels fast to me overall as a format because things can grow just so quickly. But you need to be prepared to build your deck to be able to do that in some way, and you need to expect your opponent's deck to be doing something along those lines. So
to that hypothesis, I mean, it also is a particular way of snowballing because a lot of those spells are sort of A+B synergy, where Spirit Mascot is not going to grow if you don't have spells that remove things from your graveyard. I mean, Bletch is not going to be growing as the Loathing Pest without life gain. Is that a way that maybe a good strategy for the format is going to be build a very disruptive deck that is specializing in disrupting A+B synergies, or is that not enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to happen a lot more in best of 3 situations. I mean, just think about things like Graveyard Hate, right? I mean, that's going to matter against a number of different decks, Lorehold being one of them. But
I don't want to play Graveyard Hate against Spirit Mascot, that's for sure.
I just think there's too much redundancy, right? Okay, you can eliminate your Witherbloom opponent's life gain, card. You can somehow ping their pest with a 2 pests with a Prismari charm, and now they don't have a life gain trigger. That stops them for 1 turn. But then they play their Shopkeeper's Bane, the 4/2 when Badger pest, when it attacks, they gain 2 life. And now they have another way of triggering life gain. All of their cards either trigger, either proc off a life gain or trigger life gain. They're going to have another way to do it, right? And you're going to be in situations where your opponent's going to play a card that's going to essentially put you in check. You might not know it, right? Some of them are very expensive. In Prismari, there's the Mythic Dragon, the Prismari that gives all their spells Storm. If they untap with that, you lose, right? There's I'll show you a deck later, a Witherbloom deck with that rare demon, the 7/6 demon. There's a lot of ways that you can turn that 7/6 demon into a swing for 15, 16 damage in 1 turn, right? And if you don't have a way to interact at instant speed or a way to prevent your opponent from untapping with that threat, the game could just be over.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, on the one hand, you're going to have less feel bad of oh, my opponent removed my 2 or 3 ways to gain life or to repartee or to whatever, because no, it doesn't matter. You actually have 20 of those ways in your deck. It's just not going to be, you're not going to stop your opponent entirely from doing the thing. But you have to pick your spots into key moments. In pre-release, I faced the green Paradigm spell, and what is it doing? It's putting +2/+2 counters on your opponent's things. Well, your micro strategy over the next 2 turns is there any way I can prevent you from having a board? I just need to minimize your board, and maybe stay alive long enough to peck in for enough damage to win. But what are you not going to stop them from doing? You're not going to stop them from having creatures ever. I mean, they're going to be able to do that thing, and you're not going to stop them from gaining life. So you have to stick to your plan and realize what your plan is. What are your colors trying to do? And pick your spots for where you maybe remove a key A+B action from occurring.
I think it's going to be a very skill testing format in how you divvy out your removal. And I think your goal really should be how do I become the snowball player, and not how to prevent your opponent from snowballing all
Right.
the time.
Yep.
Good points. So, with that out of the way, oh, we have still a slide about gold rares and mythics. They are some bangers there, but I don't think we need to focus on them.
We'll see some of them
there's
in the
plenty of
archetypes
them.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Already we talked about it. Okay, so we can move to the actual skeletons after a nice hour and a half of talking about the introduction. But it's important to set this scene. I think it's important to at least try to speculate on the rules of engagements in the format. And I hopefully that from that previous discussion, you know why I rearranged the slides for every color pair. And I rearranged them. Normally we have like signposts and some enablers and some payoffs. But this time I put them on the sort of scale. And it's not a spectrum. I tried to put 4 cards that are sort of on the fast, will be good in the fast version of the deck. 4 cards that are going to be in the flexible spots where they can play both fast and slow. And 4 cards that will be more useful in the slower version of the given deck. And for example, in Silver Quill on the fast scale, I picked Lecturing Scorn Mage, which is a black for a 1/1. It has Repartee. Whenever you cast a spell that targets a creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. I'm going to shortcut instant and sorcery to spell, okay? You know that it's instant and sorcery. Or Dickside Inventory, which is a white for a sorcery. Put a counter on target creature you control, and it gains vigilance, and then it has flashback. So you can have 2 very cheap spells to trigger the repartee. So you can go, I don't know, turn 1, Lecturing Scorn Mage, turn 2, Dickside Inventory. You can swing with a 3/3 Vigilant already. You can't cast it twice on turn 2 because of the mana requirements and lands in this format, but this is one of the things. Or Rabbit Attack, which is like 2 mana, any number of target creatures you control, so it triggers repartee. Get +1/+0 and gain when this creature dies, draw a card, which you can make for an alpha strike, and whatever is lost will get you a card back, which refuels you and makes sure that you can actually redeploy your aggressive strategy. And I also picked Wanderoff, which is maybe weird because it's a 4 mana removal spell, but I do think that if you're playing this kind of snowballing game plan, when you start with the 1-drop, you grow it to a big thing. The only thing that they stop you apart from removal is putting a larger blocker, and then this turn curving out 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and 4-drop removal that triggers repartee might be exactly what those decks need. And actually the 4 mana removal spell is going to be better in fast decks than it's in the slow decks, when slow decks really need that early removal because they need to stop things snowballing early rather than having to deal on the shoestring budget with the bigger things. And we have things that are more flexible, that they can be played both in the fast and the slow version. And I have Shattered Acolyte, 2 mana, 2/2 lifelinker that can destroy an artifact and enchantment as a side ability. But you know, a 2/2 lifelinker is good as an attacker, a solid 2-drop. It's also very good as a defensive creature because not only it can trade with the 2-drop, but also can give you an extra life cushion, something that you definitely need. Or Eager Glyph Mage, 4 mana 3/3 that comes with a 1/1 flying friend. It's great in the attacking deck as the top end, and it's also good in the defensive deck because it pulls multiple bodies, which protects you somewhat from it getting removed. You still are left with the 1/1 flying blocker. Or Ascendant Dust Speaker, a 5 mana 3/4 flyer, and that when it enters, it puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So good aggressively because you can put a large flying creature that can do the last points of damage that also has pseudo partial haste because it puts a counter on something else. And it's also good defensively because, again, you can make your blockers bigger. It's a big blocker. It's a good finisher later in the game. Can trigger some things by exiling stuff from the graveyard and so on. Or Render Speechless, which is like a 4 mana sorcery. You look at the opponent's hand, you pick a card from it, and they have to discard it, and then you put 2 +1/+1 counters on a target creature. Again, deal with like an annoying removal spell, a sweeper that is sitting in the opponent's hand, a big impactful creature that you won't have to deal with later, and make one of your attackers bigger. Great for attacking, but also defensively putting like an early Shattered Acolyte and making it into 4/4 lifelinker while getting rid of that one removal that your opponent has in hand is going to be great in the defensive deck. So these are the sort of pivot cards. And then there are cards that are good in the slower versions of deck. I picked the 1-mana 1/1 Death Toucher here because that's a great blocker early. It can deal, it doesn't matter if their Spirit Cow, whatever it's called, gets into a 6/6. It still dies to a 1/1 Death Toucher, so a great blocker for you. Or things like Ajani's Response. You're slower, you're less likely to attack, which means you're more likely to get attacked, which means that your opponents will have tapped creature, which means that it's a 2-mana removal spell. Great. 5-mana removal spell, not so great. But 2-mana removal spell is great, and that's why you want to play your Ajani's Response in the decks that are more likely to get attacked. And some cards for like late game, Pull from the Grave. You manage to stabilize, but you run out of resources. You get 2 creatures back from the graveyard onto the battlefield, gain some life, excellent stabilizing card. Or Forum Necroscribe, my personal pet card already for this format. 6-mana 5/4 with Ward, discard a card, and Repartee ability. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery that targets a creature, you can reanimate something. It's a great top end for the deck that just lost all their resources by blocking. You cast this. They either kill it and discard a card, which means that they're probably without resources, which makes you more likely to stabilize. Or they don't deal with it, and next turn you can cast a couple of spells that target something and get a bunch of creatures back on board, and your opponent cannot win from that situation. So this is like the scale we are operating on. And I wonder how you tackled it. And I think that Tresio, you built the Silver Quill versions. And we will have 2 versions of the deck. One more aggressive, one more controlling for each of the color pairs.
Yeah, so what you're looking at here is actually my pre-release deck. This was exactly the deck that developed out of my pool, but I put it into Skeletons because it exactly fits our skeleton structure. This deck has 3 rares. Okay. And
how did it go?
It went 3-0-6-2. It played very well. It defeated a Quandrix deck with the green paradigm card and a number of the best counter rares, and it defeated a Lorehold deck that was very strong aggro deck that also had the white paradigm at top, and then won the Silver Quill mirror in the final match. But I was very happy with the deck. And if you want to imagine getting to this in a draft, imagine that you like pack 1, pick 1 Silver Quill himself, and then you go to and then you get the other rares later. Antiquities on the Loose is one of the rares, and then the third one is the Scheming Silver Tongue there at the 2-drop, the 1/3 flying lifelinker that can draw you cards when you gain 2 or more life. So you can imagine, maybe you've picked those 3 up during the course of the draft. But if you notice what's going on here, you have a lot of gold cards like we talked about, right? I mean, look at all the gold 2s. 2 Charms and a couple of the Scolding Administrators, which is a really, really good aggressive gold card at uncommon because it's a 2/2 coming in with Menace, and it grows and it becomes an even more deadly attacker. And then even when it dies, its counters go on something, and maybe its counters go on Abigail as your 3-drop, which is in the air, or maybe it goes on the Inkling Mascot, which can be put into the air every time you trigger a Repartee. So the thing about Silver Quill is if you can get your opponent to single-digit life by turn 5 or 6, you're probably going to win. Because Silver Quill has an insane number of ways to drain your opponent. My personal pet card, and what I think is going to be, my hot take is that I think it's going to be Black's best common, and that's Melancholic Poet. Melancholic Poet is gross. I mean, Repartee, drain your opponent for 1. You know how many ways there are to Repartee in Silver Quill? Go back and look at our previous slide. There are a lot of ways of Reparteeing your opponent.
27, I think, if I remember correctly, including 8 on prepared spells.
And this deck didn't even have the Killian spell that recursively does it, right? So this was lacking that. My opponent had it. It was very annoying. But the one game that I had 2 poets on board, the game was just over. I mean, cast any spell, drain 2, drain 2, drain 2, drain 2. And here's how your finishing turns would often go. You have a couple of, smallish creatures, and then you play like, maybe you've got one poet on board and your opponent's at 7, and you're like, Silver Quill Charm, I drain you for 3. Just kidding, I drain you for 4. Right? And then you play Dissection Practice, and your Dissection Practice already drains your opponent for 1, but you're targeting something, which means you drain them for another 1. And then you play Masterful Flourish so that you can win a combat, or maybe just add 1 power to one of your creatures. But you targeted something, which means you drain them for 1. And all of a sudden, the fact that the only creature that you have that gets through hits them for 2 is irrelevant. You just won the game. There was a game that ended because I had 2 Silver Quill Charms in hand, and I had 2 Silver Quill Charms in hand, and I had Melancholic Poet, and I'm draining my opponent for 6, and then I just need to deal 1 literally any other way. That's going to happen a lot, and that really should be your plan in the fast Silver Quill deck, is get your opponent to single digits by turn 5 or 6, and then you have lots of ways of finishing, including the 5-drop, by the way. My opponent, the 5-drop that drains for 3, that's like what's the fairy card?
Drains for 2.
Sorry, drains for 2.
It's a 3/3 flyer.
3/3 flyer that
basically
drains,
a reprint of the lizard bat from the Bloomborough, isn't it?
Sure.
Well, and there was wasn't there a similar fairy card also from Wild's Veldrain, right? That was like a 5 minutes 3/3 that drained.
I think there was literally a Silver Quill card in the first Strixhaven set that was like a gold card. 5 mana.
Oh, it was one of the gold ones. Yeah. I mean, a black creature that drains some life. That's a common thing to have.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of ways to do it. I want to call out a little bit. So yeah, Administrator and Ink Mage are like 2 into 3 in this deck. Works great. Ink Mage is just a solid 3. 3/3 Vigilance, can block or can attack sometimes. Surveilling 2 is great. Smooths out your draws. Finds you your 4th land. Allows you to double spell on 4 sometimes. Very, very good. And then if you go next slide, there's Poet and like the trinkety stuff that you can do with Poet. Silver Quill Charm being able to directly drain or exile target creature, which is a target, or put 2 counters on one of your small flyers, which is a target.
Which is a repartee, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can just drain directly.
I can imagine that this like ability to finish off without engaging in combat properly is just an amazing feature there.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that you thought Silver Quill was the most aggressive of the color pairs. I slightly disagree with that. I think that it's very aggressive. But I think that actually Lorehold is more aggressive than this. But Silver Quill has the utility of being able to finish you off in trinkety ways. I mean, technically Lorehold can too with direct damage stuff. But I think Silver Quill is better at the finishing aspect of that in some of those cases.
It has reach. Yeah, there
you
go.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you have a second version of the Silver Quill, and this is a Reanimator version.
Yeah, there's lots of Reanimator tools in this set.
Necroscribe kind of situation here.
Oh yeah, Moment of Reckoning and Necroscribes at the top. Couple of the Ajani's removal spells, like you talked about. A couple of the 4/5 gold uncommon cards, which are slower cards. I think. I mean, you don't really want to be playing 5-drops very often in the previous version of the deck we just looked at.
It's still like a top end. 4/5 impulse is not a bad situation there for you, because you can find exactly the thing that you needed.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one of them there. You'd much rather be double spelling on 5 in some fashion in that deck, and targeting something, by the way. But
4/5 is just such an annoying body in this format. We saw that the creatures are not
very large
size.
Well, and that's why in the slow version of this, especially in a case where you can reanimate it, right? I mean it's just a good solid card to be in there. You've got some of the slower cards that we talked about in here. You've got the one.
Yeah, I mean, I actually wanted to comment on that we did it completely separate as slides. We worked on our own bits, and yet all the cards that I put as my slow cards are in there, because we see the 1/1 Death Toucher, we see the return 2 creatures from the graveyard, we see the Necroscribe, we see Ajani's Response.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and even Render Speechless, which is like the
pivot one, but
which hand destruction kind of thing. Well, you're looking at a longer game where I'm just going to outlast you. I put Killian's Confidence in here because that card will play well in both a fast and slow deck. Killian's Confidence is going to keep drawing you cards and continue to accrue you value over the course of the game, right? especially just little trinkety things like targeting Inkling Mascot and getting in for 2 or getting in for 3. And I only put some of the reanimation tools in there. There are so many. I mean, the White Paradigm spell that completely belongs in this deck, right? I mean, you just pulling things back over and over again.
There's literal like zombify.
Yeah,
there's Zombify, yeah.
Well, and it's hiding in the back, but Grave Researcher is the other key rare in this deck. That's the black card that actually gives you literal
we had it on the
reanimate.
first slide, I think, yeah, the one that gives you an actual
Yeah,
reanimate
there it
if
is.
you have things. And here I see that you've highlighted that these creatures can surveil, in case of Inkling Mascot, repeatedly so, which is a good thing if you want to be focusing on some kind of reanimation.
Yeah, and that's why
It's a
they're the
bit short on
particular
removal,
2s and
but I
3s
guess
that you want.
You
What's that?
sacrifice some removal to showcase the important cards, I guess. But I'm pretty sure that this deck wants a lot of removal, Last Gasps and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you have Repel Calamity and Last Gasp and 2 of the Ajani's spells. Part of the reason of putting this together is maybe you have an open white-black lane, but you're just seeing less removal spells. Well, that matters a little bit less when, you can trade things off and keep getting them back, especially things like the Death Toucher. So.
Cool. And yeah, you mentioned Killing Confidence and Foreign Necroscribe. Obviously, if you can pull it off, it's going to be amazing. And I don't think that it's very hard for the opponent to be ahead with this card because they have to lose 2 cards to kill it. And if they don't kill it, you're going to be ahead.
Yeah.
That's why I'm a strong believer that, yes, it's a 6-drop, but I think it's going to be strong in all the black schools in some versions of the deck. I wouldn't put it in the aggressive Silver Quill, but slow Silver Quill and probably any Witherbloom deck, I'm pretty happy to play that card.
Yep. And if you have a couple copies and you have multiple ways to get it back besides itself, now you have protection against lots of things.
Second Necroscribe getting the first one back.
Yeah, that's pretty nasty.
Okay, so we have the same with the Prismari, and I'm not going to go as deep into detail as I did in the first place. You see the cards that I highlighted here, but I have things like Ancestral Anger that will be on the aggressive version of the Opus decks. I think that Fractal Anomaly is not going to be a card for every deck, but there is going to be a deck, and I'm going to lose a lot of gems trying to make that card work. That's a 1-mana instant that makes a Fractal that has power and toughness equal to the number of cards you drew this turn. And I'm pretty sure that there's ways of making it like a 1-mana 4/4 on not super late turns if you have some Ancestral Angers and things that loot whenever you cast a spell. You have the Expressive Fire Dancer, which is just a 2/2 with Sword of Prowess and can get double strike if you cast a more expensive spell. And Deluge Virtuoso, which is a Frostlinks with Sword of Prowess. And I think that, this card, I'm not excited about Frostlinks, so 3-mana 2/2 that stuns something. But if I'm playing a very aggressive version of an Opus deck, getting a body, removing a blocker for a couple of turns, and then being able to Alpha Strike next turn when I untap, with a creature that will actually scale up with the more spells I cast, is not a bad idea at all. So I think it might have its spots in this kind of aggressive Prismari deck. And then you have cards that will be probably good in either way. I picked Spectacular Skywhale, that's the 4-mana 1/4 in Prismari colors. It has Opus, either get +3/+0 when you cast a spell, or put a +3/+1/+1 counters on it if you cast a spell that you paid 5 mana for. And I can see it as a sort of top end for the aggressive version when you cast it, and then next turn you cast like 2 spells and it's like a 7/4 flyer. Or I can see it as a defensive creature when you cast it, pray that it survives, and when it does, you make a 4/7 that basically blanks all the attacks from the opponent. And eventually, after a couple of other Opus spells, it's becoming so big that you were just going to win the game in a couple of swings. The Mana War is going to be great in either deck. Essence Scatter can be great in either deck because in one deck you want to use it as a 2-drop, countering their 2-drops. In the other deck you want to cast 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, maybe another 2-drop, and keep up the Essence Scatter for that pivotal blocker that they are hoping to cast on turn 4 or something. Unstable Mockery, the 3-mana deal 4, that's going to be great in either of them. Then you have cards that are really good in the slower decks. Visionary's Dance, that's a 7-mana make 2/3/3 flyers. This is the card that you cast after you stabilize, and it's great for that. And it has a buyout of to discard it, look at the top 2 cards, pick one of them and put it in your hand, which is great for selection early in the game if you need to find solutions very quick. Rabble Rouser, that's a 3 mana 1/4 that can tap for extra mana. It's a good defensive body that can be a mana dork. Does use some ramaging on the ETB. That's good in slow decks, but you probably don't want to play it in an aggressive one. Or Divergent Equation, the blue XX spell that can return X instants and sorceries from your graveyard to your hand. This, you run out of steam because you spent all your resources stabilizing. You cast that spell, resources are back, you can start taking over the game. Or Tablet of Discovery, the mana rock for red, or even double red if you're casting instants or sorceries. That looks pretty strong on those decks. So again, we have the spectrum of the fast cards, middle cards that can be pivotal, and then slow cards which will be specializing in the slower decks. And Zach, you are doing the prowess decks, and I think the first one is on the slower side.
No, this is the faster version.
Sorry, on the faster side. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
It's been a long day. Yeah.
Yeah. No worries. We'll try to go through these a little bit faster. I sort of see the aggressive decks can operate on fewer rares and more uncommons. Like, I think the rares sometimes will push you towards more of the late game decks, right? So this one only has 1 rare, which is the Dawning Archaic, which is a card that gets discounted by the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. And Prismari, of course, has a lot of different ways to cast instants and sorceries. Here, really, you have this pressure to find good 2-drops, right? The Fire Dancer and the Glassrite are both great 2-drops for Prismari. The Fire Dancer because it rumbles well, right? Its Opus trigger grows its body, and then if you get the 5 or more mana, then it gets Double Strike. Great with Ancestral Anger, giving trample to that. And then the Glassrite is a prepared creature goblin that makes a 1 mana sorcery to make a treasure as its prepare spell, which triggers your Opus, so scales your creatures. And this Thunderstorm soloist, this dwarf bard, has Opus. Whenever you cast the instant or sorcery spell, it pings the opponent, and if you spend 5 or more mana, then it does 3 damage instead, which is a great way, as Tresio said, to do the last few damage, a few points of reach damage. In this deck, also we have Tome Blast, another card that is early interaction that has flashback for 5 mana. A great way to trigger, your bonus effects from Opus and hang out in the graveyard for you to hopefully finish the deck off. You also have cards like Procrastinate, which I think a lot of decks probably won't want. But when you're aggressive, you can use that to turn off a blocker to help push through damage. And if you need to trigger your 5 mana more Opus, you can put X = 4 and get those additional triggers. And so you're sort of you're not playing that many spells that actually cost nominally 5 or more mana, but you're playing a certain amount to get those triggers. I think Stress Stream is just a great card. You're probably going to play it in any Prismari deck because it's just a removal spell with card advantages stapled on. But things like Muse's Encouragement is a creature, right? That the cost mana triggers your Opus, all sorts of good stuff. Okay. Moving right along to the, I saw you moved on to the more.
No, I was just checking what cards are you highlighting on the side, so that maybe.
Sure.
I think also
I also highlighted this Encouraging Aviator, which I have in this deck, which is this uncommon creature, the 2/3 that jumps something when it attacks, and which is a great way to put your Tackle Artist or Stadium Tidal Mage or Expressive Fire Dancer after a few triggers into the air for that big attack. And
triggers Opus every turn if you want.
And triggers Opus, exactly.
So we were talking about this card that is basically a center courser, but without the trigger effect, with slightly better body, but you have to cast the other part.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes casting it repeatedly is going to be a big upside on its own, so worth remembering that.
Also, I like Flow State in this deck. Which maybe I didn't highlight it, but you see this card from the Buzz it's getting constructed. It's the 2 mana Anticipate, that if you have both an instant and sorcery in your graveyard, you get to look at 3 and draw 2. And in some of these Prismari decks, you're going to have a lot of instants and maybe not a lot of sorceries. But Ancestral Anger is a great way to get a sorcery in the graveyard.
There is only one sorcery in blue at common and uncommon level.
Okay.
And that's Procrastinate. So that's going to be hard, and I think that you're basically planning to have multiple Ancestral Angers, which are sorceries, which make it easier to deal with it.
Exactly.
All right, and then you have a combo deck.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of saw that Tresio actually has a different flavor of this later on. So I didn't realize this. I guess we had sort of some parallel thinking here. But you don't really need to I think you don't really need to worry too much about how you're going to kill your opponent if you're doing this. Like, you need some win condition in your Prismari Storm deck, right? I think there's going to be a few ways to build it. Here, I have the Mythic Prismari, the dragon that gives all your spells Storm. And that card comboed with Rapturous Moment is just my opponent did this to me at pre-release, and it was just like, how much mana are you making? It's kind of comical, right? And then, he just basically drew 12 cards or something like that, showed me the Brainstorm, and I was like, okay, I can see it. But I think you don't even need Brainstorm, right? Brainstorm is a...
Brain Freeze. I think Brainstorm would have killed you at this moment if you had to draw 25 cards or something.
Yeah, after a few hours of streaming, I feel like...
Brain Freeze is the right description still.
Exactly. But you don't need... things like Brain Freeze and Empty the Wardens, these cards that literally have Storm on them, are pretty rare because they're rares on the bonus sheet. But you don't need them in order to have this kind of combo kill deck. Here, I'm using the Exhibition Tidecaller, which mills the opponent, or mills a player when you have an Opus trigger. And then also Math Magics, which is another one. This draws X to the power, right? You draw X to the power of 2 to the power.
Be careful,
X,
there's
right?
a math teacher in the room. Yeah, you don't want to be on the wrong side. Remember, 2 to the 0 is 1.
Yes, 2 to the 0 is 1. So and one of the things that I have purposely done in this deck, which I think is kind of nice, is that you can cast Math Magics for X equals 2, and at 6 mana you draw 4 or whatever, or you can cast it for just X equals 0 and you cycle it, right? Get it into your graveyard, and later on you have this Zealous Lorecaster, the 6 mana card. I think I put it
the Archivist with 1 extra mana and 2/2/2 in power and toughness. Yes, for those of you that play the old school Magic.
Oh,
the Archivist, I think only sorceries. No, this one gets instant or sorcery.
Yes, it returns it from your graveyard,
you can
right?
rebuy it from the graveyard, basically.
Yeah,
and
you can store Math Magics in the bin,
exactly, in your
and hold it. I mean, the joke here is that you're using it when you have a ton of mana to make your opponent draw their deck. And I think,
and you have things like Sanar also to tutor for an important piece of combo, whatever it might be, because it can search up for any instant or sorcery in your library at some stage of the game, while continuously making treasures so that you can actually ramp quite efficiently. By the way, another part of ramp in red that we didn't mention on the ramp slide, Sanar that can tap to make a treasure and cast an instant sorcery. It looks like a cool version. I'm really hoping that I can draft something like that. And you see the chock full of early interaction as well.
I think you're going to need that to not die.
Not many creatures. Yeah, you don't want to die. Yeah, you don't want to die. And as long as you can push the game long enough, you will find a way of doing something obscene. At least that's the hope with it. Oh, you also have the Muse Seeker.
These are again cards I don't have in the deck, but I'm highlighting that these are more controlling Prismari Opus cards.
I also can see
or
Muse
big
Seeker
manas.
being an aggressive card in some decks, as a way of making sure that you just draw gas for the rest of the game.
Sure, it's a little bit understated, but the two toughness is nice. I think I was really tempted in the aggressive version of this Prismari deck to put in the painter, the 2/1 painter that draws 2 when you pay 5. But I just think 1 toughness is just so
Well,
you
by
can't have
law,
it trade with a
blue-
pest token, in your aggressive
Blue
deck.
2-drops by law cannot be 2/2s, unfortunately. At least not unless they are rare or something.
Okay, yeah, we need another decade power creep to do that. And just showing off, like, I'm just saying there's a lot of redundancy in how you can get your big mana payoffs. There's also Zaffi and the Tempest, which I think is like a weaker card, but it lets you play a spell for free from your hand once per turn. And you can just load up with many Visionary Stances and the Zaffi. And your plan is just going to be, I'm going to get up to 7 mana. I'm going to cast Zaffi. I'm going to cast Visionary Stance. So I'm going to get a free set of 2/3/3 flyers. And then I'm going to use one of my recursion spells. That's 6-drop Giant, the Zealous guy that gets the instant sorcery back, or the X spell that brings things back from your graveyard to get back the Visionary Stances and keep on casting them with Zaffi for 1 each turn, to try to like just go over the top with like these flyers. And at some point, your opponent's not going to be able to block them all.
Visionary Dance is actually important piece of the puzzle here for the Prismari, because it's like
I didn't know how to actually
not
evaluate
dead
it
until turn 7, so you can actually put several of those in your deck, and if you get to chain a couple of those, sort of, we have an Imperial Oath situation. Not as good as Imperial Oath, don't get me wrong, but it does have some potential of being that common spell that gives you inevitability in the late game, one way or another. And
I mean, it is better at killing your opponent than Imperial Oath, because
and it's also
3/3 flyers will do the job.
before you reach 6-7 mana than Imperial Oath, because you can literally cycle it, and actually you get some selection out of it.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to cycle it, I think you want some way to like have a plan for it in the graveyard. Either it's to like trigger flow state, that's a good way to do it, or you want to get it back with something. Like, I think you want, like, I think with Visionary's Dance, you're not going to be happy with it unless you're using multiple parts of the card in some way.
Exactly. So yeah, as you said, you indicate that divergent equation that's another option of getting it back later in the game when you sort of stabilized somehow.
Yeah.
Okay, we have Lorehold, and here I also can see that there's going to be more aggressive versions and less aggressive versions. Group Project, Living History, these are like 2-drops that I think are pretty Lorehold specific in terms of their quality. One of them can trigger cards leaving the graveyard. The other one will trigger if a card leaves the graveyard. I also put like Dual Tactics in this fast Lorehold deck as in one of the options. That's something that also can trigger leaves the graveyard and can stop blockers quite easily. And I picked Graduation Day only to let you know that I don't think that this is specifically a Silver Quill card. It has Repartee, but it can also work in those Lorehold decks, especially when you have some flashback spells that can target things, and you can get a lot of counters out of them. And then you have like things that are more like pivotal, efficient removal in Tome Blast and Wilt in the Heat, Startled Relic Slot, a 4-mana 4/4 lifelinker with Trample that can trigger leave the graveyard triggers at will almost, and it can be a top end in the aggressive deck or a good stabilizer in the less aggressive deck. And Kirill, History Buff, that's a 2/3 for 2 mana, and 2/3 for 2 mana is going to be good at stemming the bleeding early, but also because it has some ability to cast spells and make attackers bigger, it's also good to push damage in the aggressive versions of the deck, so I think so. And then you have like the slower version of the Lorehold in the primary research. We already talked about that, the 5-mana thing that reanimates something and will continue drawing cards over the game. Colossus of the Blood Age, the Honey Mammoth of the set, a 6-mana 6/6, deals 3 damage to opponent and gains 3 life on ETB, so it gives you that life cushion. And when it dies, you can discard any number of cards from your hand and draw that many cards +1. So you can choose to discard 0 and draw 1, I guess. So it always will die into an extra card.
Where's the lightning helix in the art? Where is it? Where's the lightning helix in the art?
It's lightning helix.
Cannot target a creature, so it's not technically not lightning helix. So unfortunately, that didn't make it there. And we have like things like Pursue the Past, red and white for, gain 2 life, discard a card, draw 2 cards with some flashback action that will get value while keeping your life intact. And a Johnny's response, as in all the slower white decks, it can kill things that attack you for very cheap, quite efficiently, without looking at the sizing of the creature, making it a great slow card. And again, we have the Spectrum. And Tresio, you build the Lorehold deck, and here we have, I think that this is the aggressive version.
Yeah, and this is the aggressive version very much. You pick one of these rares early and you start building around it. I picked, I imagine, okay, you pick Emeritus of Conflict first. And I did a lot of thinking about this card when it was first spoiled, trying to determine what do I need in order to be able to generate lightning bolts out of this card. This is a perfect example of one of these prepared spell cards. I mean, you're not at all embarrassed to be playing a 2/2 first strike for 2 mana. But oh, by the way, it might ever get to lightning bolt your opponent. And you have to jump through some hoops to prepare it. I mean, it's when you cast your 3rd spell each turn, but you need to think about the snowballing effect of this. Because if you can do it one time, it's actually easier to do it the subsequent times, because the lightning bolt that you cast counts as one of the 3 spells to re-prepare your creature, right? There are going to be turns where you can actually pull it off twice in the same turn. My opponent in pre-release had this card and actually lightning bolted me to the face 2 times in the game that he won. And so what are you really looking for? You're looking for cheap prepared spells on creatures like Elite Interceptor. That's not super cheap, but it's a 2 mana spell that's drawing you a card, which is potentially drawing you into more cheap spells. And then you're looking for cheap flashback costs, like Dual Tactics. This was Dual Tactics is a really interesting card to me, because you think about the times that we've seen cards that are real feel bads, like 4 mana deal 1 to everything and none of those creatures can block for your opponents. We've seen a couple of versions of that, and those have surprisingly been one of the top cards in their format each time that they've appeared, because you just win out of nowhere. Dual Tactics is an interesting take on that. I'm going to deal 1 to this one creature and make them not able to block. So I'm not doing it to your whole board, but maybe to key parts of your board. But more importantly, I'm potentially casting 2 spells for 3 mana, right? And so all of a sudden,
graveyard.
Exactly, and leaves the graveyard. And then, oh, look at that! I'm getting closer to my 3 spells. And you can see more versions of that throughout. By the way, group project. One of the things that should be talked about there. Because you are going to see the uncommon spells from the bonus sheet a lot. In fact, that's what you're going to, we've got the guaranteed bonus sheet slot, and that's like 90+% of what you're seeing in that slot. So cards like Hop to It, that's making 3 rabbits at uncommon from the bonus sheet. Group project on 2 and Hop to It on 3. I didn't put it in here, mainly because I wanted to highlight Return the Favor, but that's pretty nasty, because then you create a 2/2 spirit on 2, you play Hop to It on 3, you tap those 3 rabbits, and you flashback group project for no mana, and you have 7/7 of power and toughness on the board by turn 3.
I think that you put one card that worked great with group project, and that's Molten Note. That's the white-red X, but
Yes.
it also untaps all your creatures, which means that you can tap your creatures to get the group
Yes.
project out of the graveyard, cast Molten Note, kill something, untap your creature, swing. That's,
Right.
I think, a good combination there. If you want to have group projects in your deck, probably you will also want to have Molten Notes in there.
Yeah, and that's there's a couple other tap your creatures things. I mean, even the card that Zach included, which can sometimes be a finisher even in the fast deck, tap to rummage when you come in, but then tap to exile a card from your graveyard, which Lorehold wants, right? And then create the red mana and ping your opponent for 1. That's another good example. Well, you tap it, and then you play Molten Note, and then you untap it, and then you do it again, right? And now you've triggered your graveyard stuff a couple of times. So Spirit Mascot into practice Scrollsmith is kind of your 2 into 3 here with your gold cards, because you can play Mascot and then Scrollsmith. If you're truly on turn 3, maybe you don't have anything in your graveyard.
Terramorphic Expanse would work.
That's right. And so but even later in the game, Scrollsmith, the way to think about Scrollsmith is it's turning a card without flashback into a card with flashback, right? So and one of the great targets for Scrollsmith is actually Wilt in the Hunt, because Wilt in the Hunt doesn't have flashback.
Wilt in the Heat?
Oh, in the Heat. Sorry. Yeah. And so, yeah, you wouldn't really Wilt in the Hunt, would you? But anyway, but that card coming out of the graveyard with Scrollsmith is really, really deadly. And so, you can kind of see where you start to get at the top of your curve. You know, you have Colossus to kind of end games. You have Sunspeaker. Sunspeaker is a great just automatic graveyard trigger every turn.
Dust Speakers. So sorry, I feel like I'm like the name police here, but
well, you're actually the 50-year-old eyes. You're the 50-year-old eyes who can't read text at the small police. Yeah. So thank you for the corrections.
I stopped memorizing the names of the card because I realized I don't have the mental capacity anymore, and I'd rather use my brain for things that are more useful than the names that change every 6 weeks, it seems. Which is unfortunate because I could do it 5 years ago. I just can't do it anymore now. Cognitive decline is a real thing. Dig Site Excavations is one of the cards that I'm missing on that list, maybe? Is it like that?
I mean, I just put in dual tech. There's several cards that are doing that job of like cheap card with cheap flashback.
Yeah. No, I get why it's not there, but I think that it looks like at least a very interesting option because with the Quill Blade Laureate that is a 1/1 double striker. Putting that extra counter is a big game. All kinds of little shenanigans there with that.
And actually, one of the reasons that I included dual tactics instead of that card is you will have to fight for that white card with the Silver Quill player who will also want it because of Repartee, but you will not have to fight with them for dual tactics, right? I mean, so here's a card that does the job that you're not going to have to fight for.
That's true.
So we can go next slide. Rabble Rouser we talked about there, right?
We don't have the slow version of the Lore Horde, do we? Or did it disappear somewhere?
No, I didn't make the slow version because I mean I have a different version linked in the slides that people can look at later.
It's fine. It's fine. We're very thorough. We're very thorough.
Yeah. The other version is a go wide version, basically, because there's lots of anthem effects.
Different
but people can look at that at their leisure when you release the slides later.
And I just want to highlight one card that was in your deck, which is Practice Tactics. That rare with flashback, absolutely disgusting.
I think Zach, you'll find that this card is called Practiced Offense.
See, raise your hand if you're in cognitive decline.
Listen.
Don't worry.
Doing that twice in a turn, you mean, and giving two things double strike or lifelink or whatever it is. Yeah, that's pretty gross.
And then
great turn 5.
My Silver Quill opponent put that on the demon, the 7/6 demon. Flashed it back, and I just died on the spot.
Well, the other fun rare that's similar that is in the set, but it's on the bonus sheet, is the 3 and a white card that gives all of your creatures 400 keywords.
Sure, Akroma's Will.
Akroma's Will.
Yes.
Yeah, that card is not fair.
I watched a game at pre-release where a player was up 22 life to 1 and immediately lost with 11 double strike damage out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's not a normal card. I've lost. Talking about bad beats in the early access, I stabilized my game. I put like a significant board, and I was hoping to win that game. And my opponent just untapped. It was quite a long one, so lots of mana was involved. But they managed to cast the 5 mana, give everything +2/+2 and menace, and followed it up by give your creatures +1/+1 and infect and trample. And I died. It was sad.
Sure. It's
menace, trampling, infect creatures.
Triumph of the Hordes, right?
The
Triumph of the Hordes. That's the green sorcery.
That's the one. Look, you regained your guru status as a person who knows the cards' names. Okay, and we have Witherbloom, which is a black-green life gain. I think that this one is maybe least of the one that has this duality, because as always with Golgari, it's going to be different flavors of mid-range. However, I do think that there is an aggressive deck based on the Shopkeeper's Bane and things like efflorescence. It's more of a... It's not like a go white small things aggro, but more like I have no mana life gain triggers on my attacks, and I can use them to the best practice. So I can turn 3 Shopkeeper's Bane, attack with it, cast efflorescence on it when they block it, or don't do anything when they don't block it, and then deploy like Old Growth Educator and make a massive creature kind of aggressive deck. That's why.
Well, and I think we saw this. We saw some of the slow cards earlier. You highlighted them earlier. I mean, the black-green board wipe spell, the black-green cauldron that brings things back from the graveyard.
Yeah.
Those cards are there.
I didn't put any
like
rares in the spectrum, basically. These spectrum only contain commons and uncommons, so I didn't put them. But of course, you will have the Toxic Deluge and stuff like that. There will be this maybe. Yeah. But it's rare-driven. I'm talking common and uncommon level. That this divide here is maybe less. There will be universal cards that can be flexibly used, like Bogwater Lumaret, like the 3/3 life, 3/3 drain 2 flyer that you mentioned in your Silver Quill deck. Cost of Brilliance, the combat vampiric tutorial, as I want to be calling it, please. And then Grapple with Death, a removal spell that just gains you a life. And I think that...
Although, you know, Cost of Brilliance, something to mention about that card. I had a copy in my Silver Quill deck. That card can play 2 ways.
Yeah, it can kill someone.
Well, specifically because of the 2-mana black creature that drains. Because all of a sudden, if you play Cost of Brilliance, the fact that it targets by putting a counter on a creature activates Repartee. And that's such a big deal in this set. Because all of a sudden, that card becomes you and your opponent each lose 1, you draw 2 cards. And put a counter on a creature, which makes it a very, very different card. So depending on which, you know, Witherbloom and Silver Quill, they both want the card for different reasons. Yeah,
of course. I think that it's great. The card is going to be great. I have very high hopes on that. I wrote on Twitter today about why I think this is going to be a great card. And then you have maybe cards that are maybe on the slower side. I picked Teacher's Pest. That's a 1/1 menace for black-green that can be recurred from your graveyard for 2 mana. It enters tap, but you can get it back to the battlefield directly. And it has the Pest ability of when it attacks, you gain 1 life. Send in the Pest, the Ravenous Rats of the set, a 2-mana sorcery that makes a Pest, and opponent discards a card. A Cheerful Osteomancer, that's a 4-mana 4/2, and it has Raise Dead as its prepared spell. I think that, you know, like a creature like a 4/2 for 4 mana is going to be much better at blocking than at attacking, because it attacks, it dies to stupid 2/2. And when it blocks, you choose what it kills. So they either limit what they attack with, which is good for you, or they attack with bigger things and you can trade it more efficiently. And also in the late game, it can rebuy the stuff that you lost and stuff like that. And Infirmary Healer, the 2-mana 2/3 that has Stream of Life as its signature spell. I think that, you know, 2-mana 2/3 is going to be good as a blocker early. And Stream of Life might come in handy if you need to trigger the life gain synergies for something, or if you really want to pump a whole turn into gaining like 8 life and then cutting out the aggressive deck. So there's going to be some selection, but it's not as clear cut as I saw in the other color combinations. So is that Zach, you are building the...
Yes.
So this is the aggressive deck with the Shopkeeper's Banes and Pest mascots.
Exactly. So here, I mean, pretty straightforward. Maybe a little bit of a glut on the three drops, but like you set up with the Bogwater Lumerant, and you just want to have some way to trigger your Life Grim trigger on 3. You play your Pest mascot. It starts to scale. You play the Shopkeeper's Bane to keep putting up pressure. You have these tricks that just really get above rate, Lumerit's Favor and Effervescence when you're gaining life. And then, you know, you have like something like Root Manipulation, which is a really scary kind of overrun effect, because it doesn't give Trample, but it gives Menace. And it's really going to be hard to block all of these.
Menace on many creatures can be way better than Trample.
Exactly.
Menace on 1 creature, manageable. Menace on 5 creatures, you're not blocking many of those.
And even like some crummy cards like the Ula Valley Shopkeep, which is not a card that I think you're going to play. I mean, you're probably going to wield this card all day. It's a, I didn't even highlight it, but it's a 3-mana 2/3
I
with
think
menace.
that what you highlight here very well is that it's a 2/3 with menace that when you gain life is a 4/3 with menace.
Yep.
And I think that this Una Ali Shopkeeper's Bane, Thornfist Striker, that's the one that gives +1/+0 and trample to the whole team when you gain life, and Pest Mascot, they all play the same role in the deck, which means that there's like a ton of redundancy there. These are all creatures that are amazing when you're gaining life, and Shopkeeper's Bane also is a life gain enabler. So the 3-drop slot, if you don't get your pest mascots, Ulna Ali Shopkeep will do a good impression of it. If you're going slightly wider, the Thornfist Striker is going to be a good impression of the Shopkeeper's Bane and stuff like that. So redundancies, I think that's what you're highlighting here very well.
Totally. And then even though it's not a great attacker, send in the pest, making the 1/1 pest token, just to guarantee that you're going to get your trigger on turn 3 when you want to play your mascot. Or you can, a lot of times your opponent just does not want to block this stupid pest because of the strength of the combat tricks. So like, if you're holding Effervescence up, like that makes that pest token into actually a pretty scary attacker. And I didn't have in this deck, but of course it fits the perfect role, is the dissection practice, right? The skullduggery plus gain of life, drain of life. Yeah. And then moving on to the more late game focus of the deck, I built it as like an aristocrat style deck around the Cauldron of Essence. So you have ways to gain life, but you're going much more wide. Lewin Exchange Student really helps you do that. If you played against that card, like that card can poop out pests like no one's business. You go quite wide. The Pest-Bond Sloth dies, makes about a bunch of bodies. All these pests are great to sacrifice to the Cauldron to get back to get back the Sloth, to get back the Necroscribe, to try to like trigger all your stuff, to get back the Tragedy Feaster, which I have in this deck. And
that's a 7/6.
7/6 trample guy with combo that with Berserk. That's pretty nice, right? Like you can put together a lethal there in one way or another. And then more so, Dean's New Vein can help you recur your cheaper creatures in order to keep the pressure going. They are forced to trade off of a Bogwater Luminant or the Newt or I really love having the one drops with Morso, because any pest token will mean that you can get back this death touching frog, right? And they just kind of can't get rid of it, or at least you're going to recur this value until you Nickel Doom die them out of the game, or you get in one big attack with your 7/6.
And also like the fact that Cauldron gives you that extra small cushion of life with draining, and then chips in, so every iteration the situation becomes a bit worse and worse for them. I think the only thing that I have a problem with in this deck, not with your deck, but generally I played the Cauldron deck in the early access, was it's not super easy to stock your graveyard. And that's why I like how Tresio highlighted those white and blue surveil creatures, and sort of lacks in the Witherbloom the capacity to fill your graveyard easily, which is
I put in Bitter Triumph because I can like discard something, I guess.
But I mean it's not like optimal.
No, totally not. And also one thing I noticed is like it's not exactly like, it's not going to be a situation like we're not cheating out 7-drops, right? There's not really Golgari 7-drops. Like there's the Witherbloom Dragon, but that's going to be discounted anyway as affinity for creatures. So like really what this is going to be is like you're trading off little guys, and all of your creatures provide you incremental value, like the Scholar, right? The 3/1 3-drop that makes a pest token, and when something dies, draws you a card. How do you pronounce that?
Hewin.
No, not Lewin Exchange
Student. Is more Welsh than me, but I think it's Hewin. It's like a weird letter.
I mean the 3-drop with the hybrid mana, the Essence Knit Scholar.
Yeah, no, I know this one. Yep.
Yeah, so like that one really engineers a scenario where like if they usually you can trigger it the turn that it enters, right? And then you can often draw a second card off of it, and then you trade it off, and then you recur it, and now you've got another 3/1 body and another pest. Then you can use that
Yeah,
pest
same,
for the
same
cauldron.
with the sloth, for example. I mean, sloth
Yes.
dies into 2 creatures that can trade later or get the cauldron action. There's
Exactly.
there's a plenty of nickel and dime value. The only like weak spot of this kind of builds I see in this deck is that it will be harder to fill your graveyard
Sure.
ahead of the curve. Like if you manage to get the game to the long, you just naturally fill the graveyard, no problem. But there might be a problem with filling it. Maybe you are supposed to be mind root yourself and discard a big creature and a land to ramp yourself into reanimation faster or something. Don't do it at home, yeah? It's not an advice.
One thing to point out about Witherbloom in general, we've been doing so much talking about how you're going to have plenty of ways to do the thing in each color pair. One of the things you're going to have less ways of doing than you will want is ways to create pests. There are only 5 cards. I don't know if there are any on the bonus sheet, but there's only 5 cards in the main set that make pests. Now you have however you pronounce it when that produces pests potentially on a regular basis. But even with that card, please notice that you have a condition other than just spending mana. Like that's not.
Yeah. It's not. There's anti-synergy with the cauldron.
One is for free.
Yeah, one is free, but you're going to be restricted from doing that more often than you'd like with that card. And so don't plan on having decks that have 4 million pests running around. Green white is not going wide very easily, and so just be aware of that when you're building.
I did highlight it here. I didn't find a place for it in my deck, but Stargaze from the bonus sheet is a nice way to put stuff into the graveyard, right? Because the cards that you don't
great in Bloomborough, but I think that in Witherbloom it actually found a better housing than anything because. And Bloomborough, it was often not possible to cast it for like a significant amount, even if you had the mana to do so. Well, now I think in some Witherbloom, it was not a problem to be like 27 life.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and we have the last school before we go to the weird build-arounds. Quandrix. And I already showcased the Cuboid Colony and Growth Curve as a combo. I see things like Fractalize that can be useful in those aggressive versions of Quandrix because it can work as a removal and as a pump spell for your small creature with tons of counters. Deluge Virtuoso also might be good here as the Frostlinks, as a way of aggressively pushing damage and preventing opponent from being able to block. Then we will have things that are pivotal, like the Noxious Newt, the 1/2 Death Touch Mana Dork, can be good in both decks. Paradox Surveyor, that card is just probably good in any version of the deck. Run Behind, the put top or bottom, good as a top end in the aggressive deck, good as a defensive turn 3 play in the less aggressive deck. Fractal Mascot could be a good top end in the aggressive deck because you can push a lot of damage with the trample. 6/6 is absolutely massive in this set, so it will be able to push some damage, especially if you have some kind of trickery associated with it. And then slow cards like Terrafractal, the blue-green X 1/0 creature that enters with X +1/+1 counters and gains you 2 life. This is exactly the card that you want to cast late, get some life back, and create like you can probably plan how many turns do you want to use it as a clock for once you cast it, because you will have that ability. Brush Off, the 4-mana counter spell. You can play this kind of a Quandrix deck that tries to stabilize by playing on instant speed and keeping a variety of instant speed spells in their hand. So you can have a counter spell, make a creature, flash in a creature's thing, or draw some card thing, like Homesickness, which is 6 mana, draw 2, tap 2 creatures, put stun counters on them. And Fractal Tender that I already mentioned in the slide when I showed you the cards that look at different speeds of the same color combination. Right, Tresio, you build the Quandrix. This is the mathematical one, the X matters version, isn't it? You're muted.
Yeah, this is kind of my solve for X, even though that's a card. You know, the idea is you pick maybe one of these two rares first, and then you start kind of building around that rare. Geometer's Arthropod wants you to have more X spells in your deck than maybe you normally would. You don't really need that many for it to start doing something. I mean, you know, Circuvet's already showed you the flying creature X blue green that is common, so you can get that whenever you want. And who else is going to be taking that card? No one's splashing for that card, so you're you know, you're going to be able to bring in the Arthropod. And I mean, look at the top card of your library and put it in your hand. That's drawing a card. So all of a sudden, if you're playing the flyer there, the X flyer, and Arthropod is on the table from turn 2, just imagine that little curve. You play Arthropod, you play the flyer on 3 as a 2/1 flyer, and all of a sudden it's a 2/1 flyer that draws you a card. Well, if I remember correctly, we've had a card in the past that's been a 2/1 flyer that draws you a card, and it was really good in its set, right? So, and that's obviously your...
And it only gained 1 life.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
This
That'd
one
be really,
draws 2.
that'd be really interesting here. But anyway, yeah, and this gains 2 life, exactly. And that's your base case for that kind of interaction, right? I mean, if you play the flyer as a 3/2 for 4, and all of a sudden you're looking at the top 2 cards and having some selection, you can see where that goes. And Arthropod is going to be tricky to kill, being a 1/4 on turn 2. A lot of the interaction that we saw, right? I mean, -3/-3 doesn't care. The card doesn't care.
Well,
and then
if you block, then it does, but
yeah,
which might be a problem that you're going to run into.
Yeah, but I mean, against a lot of the aggressive decks, you're probably not blocking with that 1/4 as much as you might in another set. I mean, there's too many tricks and repartees and things that can happen to you in the meantime. So that, you know, that's kind of what you're building around here with this X spell deck, is maybe one of these rares. And then go to the next slide.
I'm trying. I'll get there eventually.
You have Paradox Surveyor on 3 that's able to go find you X cards or land cards, which is helping you cast X cards for, you know, greater value. This is a deck, I think, that wants Procrastinate actively because it's just a very nice X spell. And by the way, you are going to have games where you face opponents with Procrastinate and all of a sudden you have 12 stun counters, which, by the way, makes blue bounce and white exile your thing and bring it back at the end of your turn even better in this set, because we've never seen that many stun counters being added to something, I don't think. But even something like Wild Hypothesis, by the way, that's another spell that surveils in green. Thinking back to Witherbloom for a second, that's a common, you know, puts a body on the board and throws some stuff in your graveyard potentially. But again, these are easy X spells that probably no one else at the table is taking. I mean, maybe Procrastinate, but Procrastinate's not going to get a lot of pressure outside of Quandrix.
One X spell that never was mentioned actually in all the stream so far is Fractalize.
Sure, very interesting card.
Yeah, the turn something
can
into
be absolutely broken in some decks.
Well, it's a cute combo with Matter Bending Mage, because you can kind of turn it into a Lava Axe. The Matter Bending Mage is the Mana War 3-drop that when you cast an X spell, it can't be blocked until end of turn. And I sort of thought that was trinket text until I, as a Quandrix player in pre-release, like killed a few opponents just by attacking with 2 Matter Bending Mages for like 3 turns in a row for, you know, the last.
I don't think it's a throwaway text. There's 8 X spells in the main set.
Yeah.
In Quandrix colors, there are some other ones that are not in Quandrix color, but just in pure Quandrix, there's 8 of them plus 3 as prepared spells, including such bangers as Stream of Life.
And, I was going to say Jadzi. It's kind of nice that they have a Valgavost Onslaught just printed as a prepared spell.
Yeah.
Yep.
You need something to be able to finish, and this is a good time to talk about the fact that my initial impressions are that Quandrix is going to be the weakest school. They have trouble getting on board early, and and they don't have as many obvious finishers as the other colors do. I think Quandrix is going to be pretty dependent on some key rares. What's that?
Archaics.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I think the Quandrix deck more often than not is going to splash, like splash red or splash black for removal.
Yes. Yeah, and we're not even really talking about some of the 3-color and more options. We've got the one Converge deck coming later.
I think that this is a solid finisher.
Sure.
That can do things.
But also the parafractal, like, you know, I just like put 8 counters on a parafractal and it's just like, okay, you know, you deal with this or you die.
Yeah. And this deck is not heavy on the other cards that are putting counters on things, which there are plenty of options for in green in particular. But this is mainly Terrafractal, you know, cast it to put counters on it and then trigger some other things at the same time. And that's kind of what I listed here at the end was these are your finishers. You know, Jadzi is a great finisher. I mean, dump your mana and just make a bunch of annoying fractals. Terrafractal being big and if you're casting it late, you know, it becomes a huge threat immediately. You can, and then Fractal Mascot, of course.
And fun fact, Jadzi does buff your Terrafractals and Fractal Mascots.
And that's why they're in here. You recognize that those 2 cards are both fractals. Jadzi does not just create the tokens, it adds to, and all of a sudden, these creatures that, by the way, already both have evasion is pretty great.
Yeah, I know Jadzi well. My opponent in the pro release had 2 copies, and yeah, it's a good card. Also, yeah, but by the way, coming back to the Fractalize, that's the blue X, turn a creature's power toughness into X+1. My view of this card is the most interesting way of using it, or most, I think, common way of using it is just for 0 on the opposing creature, because it can target opposing creatures, and that's probably the best way of using that card, in my opinion. Although, if you have the Arthropod, maybe you want to make X=1 just to draw a card. But I think that 1 mana removal spell like this, turning something into a 1/1, is pretty strong, especially when you get the flexibility of using it, as Zach said, as an aggressive tool to either
just watch out for that use against the many creatures in this format that are going to be having counters on, right?
Oh yeah, no. You will be probably immune to that because all of your creatures have counters, or so you know the interaction from your personal experience. Yeah. So that's a good way that WotC sometimes puts educational cards, and I think that Fractalize is going to be one of those educational cards that because you're using it in the context where it's tricky to use it, you're going to learn how to not use it against your opposing creatures, and you don't make this stupid spirit bear into a bigger creature than this or something.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you have the other version of the Quandrix.
Yeah, and I would call this
that's the Increment.
I would call this slower because it's using some Increment cards, but it's relying on the snowball and eventually just having incredibly massive creatures. And I kind of designed this around the Quandrix deck that I faced in pre-release that had Ambitious Augmenter. It had the green Paradigm Spell, as you see in the bottom right corner there, and it had multiple ways of just making things huge with counters. And Fractal Tender is a really important card in Quandrix, I think, because it's a snowball card by itself. There's those. Yeah,
that's the 3/3 that grows and makes fractals when it's
3/3 for 5 with Ward 2, which is very important. Helps it stick on the board with Increment. That is, by the way, a really key card with the 4 mana top or bottom spell that we saw earlier. I made that mistake in early access. I played Fractal Tender, and I could have played the 4 mana spell at the beginning of my opponent's turn, and I played it in combat, and then it did not grow my Tender, and I was sad. But there are lots of ways in Quandrix to put counters.
It's important. It triggers at the end of each end step, not at the end of your end
Yes,
step.
it's very important. Very important. And so, yeah, yours and your opponents. And And so like there's the, you see lower right there, additive evolution. That's the 5 mana enchantment that when it comes in, it creates the 3/3 fractal, but then it also puts a counter on something at the beginning of your combat step. And so when it puts a counter on Fractal Tender and then makes a 3/3, you start making an army of 3/3s, and then you look for more ways to put counters on them. And that's where you really start to snowball in Quandrix. So this is it's not going to start happening here. You can see like the really good stuff is not happening until turn 5, 6, 7. You have to get there. And that's why, playing cuboid colonies early, there's your favorite frog, Sirkovitz. We got 2 copies of the Newt in there, both to ramp you to the 5 mana stuff that you really want to be doing in like Fractal Tender and the enchantment and the lesson, but also just it's a death touching blocker, and it causes you to not die by turn 5.
And you have also barrages as a removal spell, the bite spells, where death touch is going to be absolutely essential to have.
Yeah. And even, I put in the common versions, obviously, but the frogs are also really good with, I don't really understand why this spell is uncommon, but with the +0, +10 fight spell, the frogs are really good with that spell too.
I'm almost shocked that you don't have the 5 mana draw 2 cards, 2/2 creature that gets cheaper if you have 10 power or more.
Yeah, that's a nice Quandrix card.
Yeah, that certainly could be included here. I mean, this is the deck for it, to be sure. You're going to have big things running around. Yeah.
It's kind of a funny card because, like sometimes you would maybe want to spend 5 mana on it to, like, increment your stuff, but you have too much toughness. And then you just have to accept the 2 cards for 2 mana. And
oh, no. On a 2/2. It's disgustingly bad.
Yeah. But this definitely can work. I mean, when I played this opponent, only because I was Silver Quill and had my opponent down to 5 did I win the game, where my opponent presented 3 10/10 fractals in one turn, because they had the 1/4 rare that can tap to make them for X, which, by the way, plays better in this deck than it does in the X spell deck, because it's technically not a spell, it's an ability anyway. But this is obviously a different build. You're waiting, and then to a point where all of a sudden everything has counters, and you just have way too many big threats for your opponent to deal with them all.
Yeah, this is what I call midterm deck, when you spend your early turns assembling the engine, and then the engine sort of takes over very quickly. Yeah. And weirdly, if you play without the paradigm, you probably don't have that much of a late game yourself, because the interaction is not strong enough that you have. So you need to finish the game in a particular window of opportunity, which is not too early because you cannot assemble the engine, but not also too late because you don't have the late game tools a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Okay, we can touch on the mill, but it's very similar to the Zach's build of the mill, but it's based on the same card, which is an important card, and I think it's going to be a fun build around in this format, the Exhibition Tide Color. Here you match it with the blue paradigm. I see the joke in there. Unfortunately, it won't. Well, it will still trigger.
It's not the trigger. It's not the trigger. It's that you have more than one copy of the card.
No, I get it, but unfortunately, it won't trigger for the full opus every turn when you cast the paradigm, because you pay 0 mana for it. But it will trigger.
It will trigger for 3 without you spending any mana.
Oh, 3, sorry.
And then when you have like 4 of them, it's still gonna kill your opponent.
I'm pretty sure that you don't have to get to 4 to kill your opponent. I'm pretty sure.
So, but you're only playing like a few, like
the game.
So this is like almost a mono blue deck.
Yeah, that's the whole point. And I think that this could be mono blue, and like a couple of you could easily pair it with red. You could pair it with almost any other color that's maybe drawing you some cards. And I paired it with black here just because what am I looking for? Instants and sorceries that also make creatures, right? Like Send in the Pest is just making a chump blocker and being annoying. Sure. Cost of Brilliance, we talked about earlier, that can just, you could even pair this, for example, if you got Exhibition Tide Color and you got the black paradigm spell, for example. Now you've got a plan there potentially too. But multiple copies of the 5 mana sorcery that makes a creature. Divergent Equation, I think, is really important. At uncommon, just go and get back, a couple of your key spells for 5, and then it costs 5, and you're very happy about that. So yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's worth noting that this build around I think is going to be a real thing in the format. So
Yeah, and it's not the only mill plan, obviously, either. We have the build around storm spell in the bonus sheet.
yeah,
So
Brain freeze.
brain freeze, yeah, brain
Yeah.
freeze.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not touch even the. Let's leave it for week 3. The build arounds based on the mythics from the bonus sheet. And here you have, and last I think archetype that we have. This is the Gruul Converge, and I'm pretty sure that there can be different homes for Converge. I see Quandrix Converge definitely. I see a Prismari Converge.
Yeah, I think that
why not Gruul? You have both treasures and ramp from the.
Well, again, I'm trying to pick archetypes also that are not as supported at all by the set, and I think
Makes
that
sense.
if you look at the Converge cards in the set, the greatest density of them is at red and green, and you have like some common ones sitting there at that point.
Converge is generally in Jund because there's the black spell as well. But
yeah. And I'm splashing that spell here. You notice? I mean, you're going to be able to splash just fine. Studious First Year, great card. My early pick for the best green common, and probably one of the top 5 in the set, I would think. And then you're playing the Goblin. You're playing the Goblin to be able to generate treasures because the Converge cards are expensive, and you've got to get up to them. You've got to ramp to them to some degree. So you're playing the Goblins. You're playing Seize the Spoils, which also creates treasures. You're playing a couple copies of the Potioner's Trove, which both help keep you alive later. But they're ramping you because look at your 5 spot. I mean, you have a lot of spells you'd like to cast on 5. The Wild Growth Archaic is the other spell that could fit in the Quandrix counters deck. That's actually kind of your Robroid for the set because it's putting counters on things, but I put it in because it's a Converge card. So I stuck it here. Because, if that thing's coming in with 3 counters and giving everything that comes in +3/+3, you're quite happy about that.
Wait, that card, I mean, it's a small difference, but like it doesn't, once it's on the battlefield, it's what you pay for the other cards.
Yeah, but my point being, if you were able to generate 3 colors to cast it, you can probably generate 3 colors to get your other.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
it's not always
can probably generate,
but maybe your average case is like that. You could probably pull that off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see how I built my mana base accordingly. I have no white spells, I have no blue spells, but I'm still putting in a land still putting in a plains and islands so that Studious First Year can go get it, Environmental Scientist can get it. Just to get that extra color in there. Potioner's Trove is going to be 2 copies of that, enables me to access 2 other colors that I don't have. Because by the time you're getting to your big stuff, you want to be able to be getting Converge for 4 or 5. And that's where this really starts to happen. But I'm going to be interested to try this sometimes if things start to look like dead ends other places.
Yeah. And I think that it's a very real. I played against Converge decks in the early access. They were very real, and they all had together as one, which is obviously the most broken of the spells that it has. And
Strixhaven, everything beats
I felt very comfortable about winning until I wasn't, and that's how those games ended. Because again, this was this kind of a silent creeping snowballing when. They spent a couple of turns playing the Studious First Years or making a treasure here and there. And I'm like, oh, they're not doing anything. I'm just like steamrolling them. And then together as one kills my big threat. They draw 5 cards. They gain 5 life. Next turn, I'm seeing a bunch of 3/3 flyers all of a sudden because it was a Prismari version. And it only got worse from there because the Paradigm showed up or something. So yeah, I totally can see those decks happening, and there's just so much fixing in the set that I don't see a problem with. I don't see that there's going to be an issue with 5-color soup decks because so many of the good cards are multicolors, and you don't want to be like double splashing a multicolor card, and because so many of them are synergy driven. But if you manage to build like a good score in one of the color pairs or even in Gruul, and then pepper in those archaics, it might be actually quite backbreaking. Okay, I think we've done enough. I'm going to put those slides somewhere tomorrow on my Patreon, but you can access them for free because that's not my work. I'm not going to charge you for that. Hello. we also have, at least me and Tresio did our list of the top commons and top uncommons that we predict, and top bombs. And Zaki is going to add some later.
I'm really surprised that no one has the prank or the 3 mana do 4 to a creature, surveil 1 in red. Like, that just seems like a very push removal spell. Maybe because it's damage dealing, and I know Tresio, you're down on anything that's damage based removal
in this set. Yeah. That's the knock against it.
I'm slightly down on red, to be fair. Slightly. I don't think it's going to be weak or something, but I think that I'm at least at early format. I'm thinking Silver Quill is going to be running the tables, and maybe Lore Holt, but it doesn't really need that particular card. There's just lots of redundancy for it. Well, it's a good card. I had 2 in my pre-release kit, and they were the source of most of my victories. So yeah, definitely I'm not against it. I just think it's more like a top 10 common than a top 3 common.
Sure, totally.
It's still a great card. Very good. The surveil, even though I forgot the surveil like half of the time, it was still pretty good. So on Arena, luckily, it will remember for you. But I know that, Tresio, you need to be running. So let's finish it off here. And thanks, guys, for being here. It was like a really deep dive. It took us longer than we do normally in 4 people because we could actually dive deeper into the philosophy of the set and maybe talk about some things that normally we don't cover. I think it's very interesting as a set.
I think that just goes to show like how excited we are to enroll into one more semester at Strixhaven.
I mean, I got I didn't play many drafts in the early access, but I got beaten quite a lot there, and I still am excited to play the set, which is a very good sign. The games were interesting, drafts were interesting, bonus sheet is dope. I mean, there's just so much about the set that I really like, and I'm looking forward to properly explore it and
well, and I think for people that are going to draft, to tomorrow when it comes out on Arena or this coming weekend on official release, when you're approaching that, there's 5 color pairs, but it's not you got to get your mind out of like the small sets that we've had recently, the Spider-Mans and Turtles and things like that, where there's really only 5 archetypes and maybe 1 or 2 of them aren't so great. And I mean, we even experienced that in Lorwyn, right? That there were 5 color pairs and maybe only Merfolk had 2 distinct ways you could play fast and slow on a consistent basis, like we were talking about today. And so now what happens? What are the other 2 drafters supposed to do? I don't think you're going to experience that in this set. I mean, if you have 5 drafters taking 5 color pairs to start with, and then let's say that even only 2 of the color pairs, their other lane has sufficient density of cards in that particular pool, right? That's 7 drafters. And the 8th drafter can just like play 3 colors or play some Converge or
or open a build around rare. I mean, that's also an option.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot less people getting done with drafts and feeling like, man, I didn't really see a lane that I had. I kind of had to just throw a bunch of cards together, and that's just going to make the drafts a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's an exceptionally well designed set in terms of philosophy of it. I don't know if it's going to work out exactly as they planned it to, but I think that at least the just consciousness of them having that philosophy of, we're doing a 5 color set, but still there are 10 decks to draft. That's excellent. Yeah. I'm looking forward to more of that, even if this one doesn't work. So yeah. All right. Any plugs that you have? Zach, do you have any stand-up shows that we have to go if we live in Minnesota?
Yeah, actually, it's like,
oh Lord. Luckily, I don't live in Minnesota, so I'm excused.
I'm performing at Bryan Lake Bowl, I guess. Like May something, whatever. Good. If you're in Minnesota, just come on the street, spit in my mouth. I don't know what to tell you at this point.
Don't do that. Minnesota
hunt me down.
Trouble already.
Fine. Jacob Fry, come fight me.
Tresio, do you have anything to plug?
If you're a teacher and you're in Minnesota, you can come watch me perform in a sense at the state math teaching convention this coming weekend in Duluth. But no, I started streaming a little bit more than I had before. And so I plan to do some streaming tomorrow on the first day of release on Arena, and periodically throughout the set, because, I have a responsibility as a teacher to show up to school in Strixhaven.
Exactly. And again, you must be Quandrix. That just comes with the job description. I'm Witherbloom, I assume.
I thought I was going to want to play Quandrix more than the other schools coming into this set on some of the initial spoilers, and my mind has changed about that, actually.
Yeah, I'm looking for a Lordhold. I want to explore a bit of Lordhold space early weeks. I think it's going to be a bit more open. Listeners, think about that. But okay, well, it's been a great one. Thank you very much for joining. And tomorrow or today, if you're listening to it on the podcast, or yesterday, time to actually do practicals, because that was a good theoretical background, but theory will verify that. And enjoy the first drafts. It's always a lot to explore, but hopefully we gave you a bit of a background to put your brain in the right track to continue exploring on your own. And with that, I'll see you next week, or actually in half a week, when we'll be talking about the early data for this format already, and then authoritatively state which is the best color pair and what you have to draft force for the rest of your life, without any subtlety or anything. Till then, bye-bye.